They tossed me a $2 scratch-off like a bone to a dog, while my brother received a $15,000 cruise. Mom laughed, saying luck might finally smile on a failure like me. She was right. I won $150 million. But they do not know I also hold proof his cruise is actually a death warrant. Grab a drink, because you are about to watch a black sheep burn their fake empire to the ground. My name is Charlotte Redmond, and if you looked at my bank account this morning, you would see a number that barely covers rent in a city that charges you for breathing. If you looked at me, shivering inside a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a heater that sounds like a dying cat, you would see a woman who looks more like the help than the heir. That is exactly what the private security guard at the gate thought too. The snow was coming down in sheets, a classic Boston nor'easter trying to bury the sins of the city under 6 inches of white powder. I rolled down my window, the freezing wind slapping my face, and looked up at the guard booth. The man inside was new. He looked at my rusty sedan, then at my parka, which had seen better days, and then he waved his hand dismissively without even opening the gate. "Deliveries go to the service entrance around the back," he barked over the intercom. "And you are late. Mrs. Redmond is already screaming about the catering." I stared at him, my grip tightening on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It was fitting, really, to the world, and specifically to the people inside that sprawling mansion. I was just a service provider, a forensic accountant, the person you call to clean up the mess, not the one invited to the feast. "I am not catering," I said, my voice flat. "I am Charlotte Redmond, Richard's daughter." The guard paused. I saw him squint at a clipboard, then look back at my car with a mix of skepticism and pity. The gate eventually groaned open, allowing me to drive up the winding, heated driveway that cost more to install than my college tuition. The contrast was nauseating. My tires crunched over pristine asphalt while the engine of my Honda rattled in protest. Entering the Redmond estate was always like stepping onto a stage set for a play that everyone knew was a tragedy. But we all pretended was a musical. The foyer smelled of expensive pine, roasted turkey, and desperation. My mother, Evelyn, was there to greet me. Or rather, she was there to inspect me. She wore a silk dress that shimmered like spilled oil, diamonds dripping from her ears. "Charlotte," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "You are late, and you look tired. Is that the same coat you wore last Christmas?" "Happy Thanksgiving to you too." "Mother," I replied, hanging my coat on the rack beside a fur wrap that probably cost $20,000. The dining room was a masterpiece of excess. The table groaned under the weight of food that could feed a small village. A 20-pound turkey sat in the center, surrounded by sides that had been prepared by a private chef since 4 a.m. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier light. My father, Richard Redmond, sat at the head of the table, swirling a glass of red wine. It was a Chateau Margaux. I knew the vintage. I also knew that the family real estate firm, Redmond Holdings, had not paid the janitorial staff in 3 months. I knew because I was the one who balanced the books. I was the one who saw the red ink bleeding across the ledgers while they drank wine that cost $2,000 a bottle. "Sit down, Charlotte," my father grunted, barely looking up. "Don't bring that cold air in with you." I took my seat at the far end of the table. The seat is usually reserved for distant cousins or unwanted guests. My sister-in-law, Monica, was already seated, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and gave me a smirk that was as sharp as the knife next to her plate. "Hey, Char," she said. "Love the sweater. Very vintage," before I could respond. The double doors burst open. My brother, Caleb, stumbled in, at 38 years old. Caleb was the golden boy of the Redmond family. He was also a drunk, a gambler, and a complete liability. He looked disheveled, his tie undone, his face flushed with bourbon and rage. He held an iPhone in his hand, or what used to be an iPhone. The screen was shattered, the metal casing bent. "Unbelievable!" Caleb shouted, slamming the broken device onto the pristine tablecloth, narrowly missing the gravy boat. "The Giants lost. Can you believe that those useless idiots just cost me $5,000? My mother immediately rushed to his side, her face full of concern, not for the phone, or his gambling addiction, or his liver, but for his mood. "Oh, my poor baby," Evelyn cooed, stroking his shoulder. "It is just a game, Caleb. Don't let it ruin your appetite. Sit down. Mommy will pour you a drink." "It is not just a game, Mom," Caleb snapped, shaking her off. "It is the principle of the thing." I watched this display with the detached observation of a scientist watching rats in a maze. Caleb was a tantrum brother in every sense of the word. He broke things when he was mad, and my parents swept in to replace them with bigger, better toys. He had never worked a day in his life. Yet his title at the company was Executive Vice President. My title was Senior Auditor, and I had to beg for a raise last year. Dinner was an exercise in torture. We ate in relative silence, broken only by Caleb's slurred complaints about the stress of his life and Monica chiming in about how hard it was to find good help these days. I cut my turkey into tiny, precise squares, focusing on the geometry to keep from screaming. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for: the gifts. In the Redmond family, Thanksgiving was not about gratitude. It was about flaunting wealth. It was a power play. My father stood up, tapping his glass with a silver spoon. "Family," he began, his voice booming with the false bravado of a man who knows his empire is built on sand. "This year has been challenging, but we have persevered, and we want to reward those who have carried the torch." He turned to Caleb and Monica. My mother beamed, handing them a thick, gold-leafed envelope. "For my son," Richard said, puffing out his chest, "and his lovely wife. You two have worked so hard. You deserve a break." Caleb tore open the envelope, a grin spread across his face, erasing the earlier anger about the football game. "No way," he said. "The Diamond-class Mediterranean package. $15,000, my mother whispered loudly, making sure I heard. "All inclusive, 2 weeks on the finest liner in the world. You leave next week." "Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Mom." Caleb cheered, high-fiving Monica. Finally, some relaxation. This place was getting suffocating. Then, all eyes turned to me. My father reached into his pocket. He did not have a gold envelope for me. He pulled out a crumpled white envelope, the kind you buy at a gas station convenience store. He tossed it across the table. It slid over the polished wood and stopped just short of my water glass. "And for Charlotte," Caleb sneered, leaning back in his chair. "Since you love numbers so much, since your job is so dry, always digging for pennies, looking for mistakes, we thought we would give you a chance to play with some real numbers." I opened the envelope. Inside was a single scratch-off lottery ticket. The price tag printed in the corner read $2. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at the ticket, then at my parents. They were smiling. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of people who enjoyed putting someone in their place. "It is a joke, Charlotte," my father said, chuckling. "Lighten up. Maybe you will get lucky. God knows you need it, with that car of yours." "But that is not all," my mother interrupted, her eyes gleaming. "Richard, tell them the news." My father cleared his throat, standing up straighter. "I have decided to step down as CEO next month, and I am handing the reins of the company over to Caleb. He is ready. He has the vision." "And Charlotte?" Monica asked, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Charlotte will continue to support her brother," my father said dismissively. "She has her job, and she has our love. That is inheritance enough." The room spun slightly. It wasn't the wine. I hadn't touched a drop. It was the sheer audacity. They were handing a sinking ship to a captain who would drill holes in the hull just to see the water rise, and they were insulting me to my face while doing it. "Excuse me," I said, standing up abruptly. My chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that cut through their laughter. "I need some air." "Don't jump," Caleb shouted after me, roaring with laughter at his own wit. I walked out onto the balcony. The cold wind hit me like a physical blow, instantly freezing the tears that were threatening to form. I refused to cry. I was 34 years old. I was a professional. I dealt in facts, in hard evidence, not in emotions. I looked down at the crumpled ticket in my hand. $2, the price of their respect. With a shaking hand, I dug a coin out of my pocket. It was a quarter. I started to scratch. I didn't do it with hope. I did it with rage. I scratched away the silver coating violently, destroying the surface. 1 number, match. 2 numbers, match. 3 numbers, match. 4, 5. I stopped. My breath hitched in my throat, creating a cloud of white fog in the freezing air. I looked at the prize box. $150 million. I stared at the number. I blinked, sure that the stress had finally caused a hallucination. I pulled out my phone, my fingers numb from the cold, and opened the state lottery app. I scanned the barcode at the bottom of the ticket. The screen loaded. A green banner flashed across the display. Congratulations. Verified winner. Jackpot. $150 million. I did not scream. I did not jump. A strange, icy calm washed over me. It was the same feeling I got when I found a discrepancy in a ledger. The moment the puzzle pieces clicked into place and I knew I had caught a thief, I looked back through the glass doors. Inside, they were toasting with champagne. Caleb was miming a golf swing. Monica was showing off her ring. My parents were beaming at their golden son. They thought I was the loser. They thought I was the failure. I carefully folded the ticket. I placed it inside the hidden pocket of my bra, right against my skin. It felt hot, like a branding iron. I composed my face, smoothing out my expression until it was a blank mask. I slid the glass door open and stepped back into the warmth of the dining room. "Feeling better?" my mother asked, not looking up from her plate. "Much," I said softly. The air was clarifying. I sat back down. I watched them. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt like a predator watching prey that didn't know it was already dead. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a single vibration. I ignored it at first, but then it buzzed again. It was a priority alert. I had set up specific notifications years ago. As a forensic accountant, paranoia was part of the job description. I had alerts for everything involving my name, my credit, and my accounts. I slipped the phone under the table and glanced at the screen. It was an automated email from the bank. Alert new lien recorded. Property 42 Elm Street. Apartment 4B. Type second mortgage. Amount $15,000. Signatories: Richard Redmond, Evelyn Redmond. I froze. Apartment 4B. That was my apartment. The small 2-bedroom condo I had lived in for a decade. The one my parents had co-signed for when I was 24 because I didn't have the credit history yet. I had paid every single mortgage payment myself for 10 years, but their names were still on the deed. I looked at the amount again. $15,000. My eyes shot up to the golden envelope sitting next to Caleb's plate. The Diamond-class cruise, the one that cost exactly $15,000. The air left my lungs. They hadn't just insulted me. They hadn't just given me a $2 ticket while giving him a luxury vacation. They had stolen from me to do it. They had forged my signature, or used their power of attorney buried in some old paperwork, to take out a loan on my home to pay for his party. I looked at my father. He was laughing at something Caleb said, his face flushed with wine and pride. He had leveraged the roof over my head to buy a toy for his son. The ticket in my bra burned hotter. The email on my phone screen glowed. "Is everything okay, Charlotte?" Caleb asked, noticing my stare. "You look like you just swallowed a lemon. Don't tell me you lost on the scratch-off too." I slowly put my phone away. I picked up my water glass. My hand was steady, rock steady. "No, Caleb," I said, my voice smooth, devoid of any tremor. "I didn't lose. I think I'm just starting to understand the game." "Good," he scoffed. "About time." I took a sip of water. It tasted like metal. I had $150 million against my chest, and I had a notification that they had stolen $15,000 from me. The debt had been called, and I was going to collect. The notification on my phone screen was a digital receipt of my family's betrayal. $15,000. It was a second mortgage, a lien against the only thing I truly owned, executed without my consent, likely with a forged signature that my mother had practiced until it looked more like mine than my own hand did. I stared at my father, who was currently laughing at a joke Caleb had made about poor people buying lottery tickets, the irony entirely lost on him. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. That is what Caleb would have done. That is the reaction of a child who does not understand leverage. Instead, I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and silent. "Going somewhere?" Monica asked, her voice shrill. "We haven't even had dessert. Evelyn ordered that pumpkin cheesecake you claim to like." "I am full," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and metallic. "I hope you all enjoy the cruise. I hope you enjoy everything that is coming your way." My mother waved a dismissive hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Oh, stop being dramatic. Charlotte, go home and cool off. We will see you at Christmas. Bring a better attitude next time." "She is just jealous." "Mom," Caleb sneered, pouring himself another glass of the $2,000 wine. "Some people just can't handle seeing others succeed." I looked at them one last time. It was like looking at a photograph that was already fading. I turned and walked out of the dining room, down the long hallway, and out the heavy oak front door. The blast of winter air was a relief. The snow was falling harder now, burying the world in white silence. I got into my Honda, the engine groaning as it turned over. As I backed out of the driveway, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Caleb. "Don't be such a party pooper. You're embarrassing yourself. Grow up." I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I did not go home to my apartment. I drove through the blinding snow, my mind racing not with anger, but with a cold, hard plan. I parked in a 24-hour diner parking lot and sat there until dawn, the engine running intermittently to keep me from freezing. The ticket in my bra felt heavy, a physical weight anchoring me to a new reality. At 8 in the morning, I called David. David was a former colleague from my days at the Big Four accounting firm. A shark in a suit who hated my family almost as much as I do now. He was the only lawyer in Boston I trusted to keep his mouth shut. "Charlotte," his voice was groggy. "It is 8 on a holiday weekend. You better be in jail or dead. I need you to meet me at the state lottery headquarters in Braintree in 1 hour," I said, "and bring the paperwork to form a blind trust. We are calling it Nemesis LLC. "Nemesis." David paused. "Okay, you have my attention. Why do we need a trust?" "Because I am holding a winning ticket for $150 million, I said calmly, "and I do not want the world, or my family, to know my name." The silence on the other end lasted for a full 10 seconds. Then I heard the sound of bedsheets rustling and feet hitting the floor. "I will be there in 45 minutes. The process at the lottery headquarters was a blur of bureaucracy and disbelief. The officials checked the ticket, then checked it again. They scanned it. They held it up to the light. They looked at me, in my crumpled clothes from the night before. And then at David in his pristine Italian suit. When they confirmed the numbers, the room seemed to shrink. $150 million, after taxes, and taking the lump sum option, it would still be a staggering amount of power. We signed the papers. Nemesis LLC was now the legal owner of the fortune. My name appeared nowhere on the public record. As we walked out of the building, David handed me a secure tablet. "The funds will be wired to the trust account within 3 business days, he said, his eyes gleaming behind his glasses. "What is your first move?" "Buying an island." "A new car?" "No," I said, taking the tablet. "My first move is an audit. I found a quiet coffee shop, one with dark corners and strong Wi-Fi." I sat down and opened the laptop I had brought with me. For years, I had handled the personal taxes for my parents. They were too cheap to hire an outside firm for their personal filings. Assuming that Charlotte the workhorse would do it for free, they were right. I always had. But what they forgot was that to do their taxes, I needed administrative access to their financial ecosystem. They had never revoked my credentials. I logged into the Redmond Holdings private server. It was a mess of shell companies and offshore accounts, a typical structure for a real estate developer trying to dodge taxes. But I wasn't looking for tax evasion today. I was looking for the truth about the cruise. Why would my parents, who I knew were cash poor, spend $15,000 on a vacation for Caleb? And why did they need to steal my house equity to do it? I pulled up the credit card statements. Nothing. The cruise wasn't paid for by credit card. I checked the bank transfers. There was a wire transfer sent 2 days ago to a travel agency in the Cayman Islands. The amount was exactly $15,000. I dug deeper into the travel agency. It was a legitimate front. But the specific package they bought for Caleb, the Diamond-class Mediterranean, had a very specific itinerary. It departed from Boston, headed into international waters, and its first port of call was not a tourist trap in Italy or Greece. It was a small, sovereign island nation that had no extradition treaty with the United States. My fingers flew across the keyboard. This wasn't a vacation. This was an extraction. I switched tabs to Caleb's personal accounts. I had access to these too, because I had bailed him out of overdraft fees more times than I could count. His checking account was empty. His savings were negative. But his gambling debts, I traced a series of payments to a shell company called Venture Capital Solutions. The name sounded corporate, but the transaction pattern was classic loan sharking. High interest payments, weekly transfers, odd amounts like $4,900 to avoid federal reporting triggers. Then I saw it. A massive balloon payment was due next week. $5 million. I sat back. The cold coffee forgotten on the table. Caleb didn't just owe money to bookies. He owed $5 million to organized crime. He had likely borrowed it to fund some sure-thing investment scheme that had imploded. Or perhaps he had simply gambled it away on high-stakes poker. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together. The cruise was a one-way ticket. Once Caleb was in international waters, he would disappear. He would get off at that non-extradition port and never come back. My parents knew. They knew their golden boy was a dead man walking if he stayed in Boston, and the money to save him, the money to buy his ticket to freedom. It came from my apartment. They had forged my signature on the second mortgage, not because they wanted to buy him a gift, but because they were desperate. They were willing to render me homeless, to let the bank foreclose on the roof over my head, just to buy Caleb a chance to run away from his own mess. They didn't care that when the bank came for the money, I would be the one on the street. To them, I was collateral damage. I was just a resource to be harvested to keep Caleb alive. I closed the laptop. The rage that had been simmering in my gut turned into something colder, something solid. It was no longer about being unloved. It was about survival. I left the coffee shop and drove straight to my apartment. I did not have much time. If the mortgage papers had gone through yesterday, the bank would be sending notices soon. But more importantly, I could not stay there. If the loan sharks couldn't find Caleb, they would come looking for his family, and my parents would happily point them in my direction to save themselves. I entered my apartment for the last time. I didn't pack everything. I didn't want the memories. I took my documents, my hard drives, my jewelry, and the few clothes that didn't remind me of the woman I used to be. I left the furniture. I left the family photos. I left the life that Charlotte the doormat had built. I called a moving service to take the rest to a storage unit, paid in cash, under the name Jane Doe. Then I drove to the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in downtown Boston. I need a suite, I told the concierge, presenting a black credit card that David had issued to me under the trust's name. For an indefinite stay, and I require absolute privacy, my name is on the card, but for the hotel registry, please use the alias Ms. Black. The concierge did not blink. Rich people had secrets, and he was paid not to ask questions. Of course, Ms. Black, the presidential suite is available. It has a lovely view of the harbor. Perfect, I said. I want to see the ships leave. 2 hours later, I was standing in a room that cost more per night than I used to make in a month. The shower was marble, the sheets were Egyptian cotton, and the silence was absolute. I turned on the massive flat-screen television mounted on the wall. The local news was on. The anchor looked excited, a graphic of a lottery ball spinning behind him. "Breaking news in the search for the mystery millionaire," the anchor announced. "The State Lottery Commission has confirmed that the single winning ticket for the $150 million jackpot was sold at a gas station in Weston. We are live at the scene." The camera cut to the gas station. It was the one 3 blocks from my parents' estate. The clerk, a teenager with acne and a nose ring, was grinning at the camera. "Yeah, I remember selling a few tickets that day," the clerk said. "Mostly to rich folks from up the hill. They come in their fancy cars, buy a $2 ticket, and act like they are doing us a favor." I watched the screen, sipping a glass of water. My parents were currently in that house, up the hill. They were probably watching this too. They would hear the location. They would realize the timing. My mother, with her sharp memory for every penny she spent, would remember exactly where she bought that joke gift for me, my phone, which I had placed on the coffee table. Lit up. It was my mother. Then a text from my father. Then a call from Caleb. They were realizing it. The slow, creeping horror that the garbage they threw at me was actually a golden ticket. I did not answer. I picked up the hotel room phone and dialed the front desk. "This is Ms. Black in Suite 401, I said. "I am expecting no visitors. If anyone asks for Charlotte Redmond, she is not here. If anyone tries to come up, call the police." "Understood, Ms. Black," the concierge replied. I walked to the window. Far out in the harbor, the gray steel of the Atlantic Ocean churned under the winter storm. Somewhere out there, a cruise ship was preparing to dock. But Caleb wouldn't be on it. Not yet. He was still here, trapped in his debt, thinking he was about to escape. He had no idea that I had just canceled his ticket. I sat down at the desk in the suite and opened my laptop again. I pulled up the travel agency's confirmation page for the cruise. I had the booking reference number from the wire transfer. I hovered my mouse over the Modify Booking button. I didn't cancel it. That would be too easy. Instead, I flagged the reservation in the system. I added a note in the internal comments field, a trick I learned from auditing travel expenses. I flagged the passenger as a high-risk security concern, potential payment fraud. When Caleb tried to board that ship, he wouldn't be greeted with a lei and a cocktail. He would be greeted by port security. He would be detained, and while he was stuck in that little room explaining himself, the clock on his $5 million debt would keep ticking. I leaned back in the leather chair. The hunt had begun. They wanted to feed me to the wolves fine. I would become the wolf, and the first thing a wolf does is isolate its prey. The phone on the table buzzed again. 20 missed calls. I smiled. A cold, humorless expression that felt entirely new on my face. Let them ring. Let them panic. The forensic audit of the Redmond family had officially commenced, and I was going to dissect them dollar by dollar, sin by sin, until there was nothing left but the truth. The vibration of my phone on the mahogany desk was incessant. It was like a heartbeat, rapid and panicked. My mother, Evelyn, had called 42 times in the last hour. My father, Richard, had called 15 times. And Caleb. My brother had sent a barrage of text messages that ranged from incoherent begging to violent threats. I sat in the armchair of the presidential suite, overlooking the Boston harbor, and let the phone buzz. I picked it up only once, not to answer, but to play the voicemail my mother had just left. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to record the sound of hypocrisy. "Charlotte, darling," Evelyn's voice crackled through the speaker, dripping with a sugary sweetness that made my stomach turn. "Where are you? We are so worried. We saw the news about the ticket. Oh, honey, we are so happy for you. Please, call Mommy back. We need to celebrate as a family. We made a mistake last night. We were just stressed. Please, come home. We love you." I saved the message. "We love you." 3 words she had not said to me in 20 years, suddenly unlocked by a jackpot of $150 million. I did not call back. Instead, I made a call to a private security firm recommended by David. Within 2 hours, my suite was no longer just a hotel room. It was a fortress. 2 men in dark suits stood outside my door. Inside, a man named Stone, who looked like he was carved from granite, stood by the window. He was the head of my detail. "No one gets in unless I authorize it," I told Stone. "And if my family shows up, I want to know immediately, but do not let them up." "Understood, Ms. Redmond," Stone said, his voice deep and reassuring. "We have secured the perimeter. We are monitoring the elevators and the stairwells. You are safe." Safe. It was a foreign concept, but I wasn't just hiding. I was waiting. Across town. The dynamic had shifted. I knew exactly what was happening because I was still monitoring their digital footprint. Caleb had stopped packing. The suitcase that was supposed to carry him to his escape on the cruise ship was now sitting open on his bed. Half empty. Why run away to a life of hiding in a third-world country when your sister just won $150 million? Greed is a powerful drug. And Caleb was an addict. He had done the math in his twisted head. If he could get his hands on my money, he could pay off the $5 million he owed to the loan sharks. He could pay off his gambling debts. He could keep the company. He could stay the king of Boston. He didn't want to survive anymore. He wanted to conquer. And he thought I was the same weak pushover sister he had bullied for 3 decades. He thought he could just take it. The GPS tracker on my father's Lincoln Navigator showed them moving. They were leaving the estate. They were driving fast. Their destination was my apartment. I watched the dot on the map stop at my address. I could vividly imagine the scene. My father, breathless and red-faced, banging on the door of the apartment he had just mortgaged out from under me. My mother, peering through the windows, looking for her golden goose, but they would find nothing. I had already received the notification from the bank. The foreclosure process had not started yet, but the lockbox was on the door because I had surrendered the keys via a courier service that morning. The apartment was empty. The furniture I left behind was covered in sheets. It looked like a tomb. Caleb sent another text. "Where are you? You ungrateful brat. We know you won. Open the door." They were panicking. They stood in the freezing hallway of a building they considered beneath them, realizing that the bird had flown the coop. Then, they made the move I expected. They hired a professional. I saw the charge hit my father's credit card almost immediately. Beacon Hill Investigations. A rush job. It was pathetic, really. They didn't need a private investigator to find me. They just needed to look at their own assets. I had made a tactical error, or perhaps a subconscious trap. I had driven my Honda Civic to the hotel. The car was 10 years old, but because of insurance purposes, it was still technically registered under my father's name as part of a family fleet policy to save money. It had a factory-installed tracker. It took the private investigator less than 30 minutes to ping the car's location. "Ms. Redmond," Stone said, pressing his earpiece. "Security downstairs reports a Lincoln Navigator pulling up. 3 passengers. They match the description of your family." I stood up. I walked to the full-length mirror. I had spent the last few hours not just strategizing, but transforming. I had sent a personal shopper from the hotel to the nearby boutiques. Gone was the frumpy wool sweater and the sensible slacks. I was wearing a tailored black suit that cost $4,000. It was sharp, architectural, and intimidating. My hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was blown out straight and sleek. I wore stilettos that clicked on the floor like weapon fire. "Let them into the lobby," I said. "I will meet them down there." "Are you sure?" Stone asked, frowning. "We can remove them." "No," I adjusted my blazer. "I want to look them in the eye. I want them to see me." I took the elevator down. Stone and another guard flanked me. When the doors slid open, the lobby of the Mandarin Oriental was buzzing with the usual afternoon tea crowd, but the noise died down as people noticed the commotion near the entrance. My family was there. They looked frantic. My mother's hair was windblown, her makeup slightly smeared. My father looked gray, clutching his chest. Caleb looked like a rabid animal, his eyes darting around the room until they landed on me. "Charlotte!" my mother cried out. She ran toward me, arms wide open, tears instantly springing to her eyes. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Oh, thank God, we were so worried you just disappeared." She tried to hug me. Stone stepped forward, his massive frame blocking her path. He didn't touch her. He just existed in her space, a wall of muscle that forced her to stop. "Ma'am, step back," Stone said, his voice low. "Excuse me," Evelyn gasped, looking offended. "I am her mother, Charlotte. Tell this brute to move." I stepped out from behind Stone. I stood tall, my chin lifted. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized how small she seemed. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was ice. "Hello, Father, Caleb." "Charlotte," my father said, stepping forward, trying to regain his authority. "What is this nonsense? Why are you hiding in a hotel? Why do you have bodyguards? We are your family." "Family." I repeated the word as if tasting something rotten. Family don't mortgage their daughter's home behind her back to buy a vacation for their son. The color drained from my father's face. My mother froze, her hand halfway to her mouth. We didn't," my father stammered. "It was a business decision. Charlotte, a bridge loan. We were going to pay it back next month." "Lies," I said simply. "You were never going to pay it back. You were going to let the bank take my home while Caleb drank margaritas on a death cruise." Caleb pushed past our parents. He didn't care about the house. He didn't care about the lies. He only cared about the ticket. "Cut the crap, Charlotte," Caleb spat, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and desperation. "Where is the ticket Mom said you won? 150 million. Is that true?" I looked at him. He was sweating, despite the cold outside. His hands were trembling. He looked like a man who had 24 hours to live, which, according to my research on his debt, was accurate. "It is true," I said calmly. "I won." "Give it to me," Caleb demanded, extending a hand. "Dad said you have to give it to me. It is family money. I am the CEO. I handle the finances." I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "You aren't a CEO, Caleb. You are a gambling addict with a $5 million bounty on your head, and I am not giving you a single cent." The lobby went silent. The guests having tea stopped chewing. The staff froze. "You know," Caleb whispered, his eyes widening. "I know everything," I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping so only they could hear. "I know about the loan sharks. I know about the Venture Capital Solutions shell company. I know why you needed that cruise. You weren't going on vacation. Caleb, you were running away." Caleb's face twisted. The humiliation of being exposed by the sister he deemed a failure was too much for his fragile ego. He snapped. "You bitch," he screamed. "That is my money. I am the heir. Give it to me." He lunged at me. His fist was raised, aiming for my face. He never reached me. Stone moved with a speed that defied his size. He caught Caleb's wrist in midair, twisted it, and swept his leg. Caleb hit the marble floor with a sickening thud. Before he could scramble up, the second guard had a knee on his back, pinning him down. "Get off me!" Caleb shrieked, thrashing against the floor like a fish. "I will kill you, Charlotte. I will kill you. That money belongs to me," my mother screamed, clutching her pearls. "Stop it. You are hurting him, Charlotte. Make them stop. He is your brother." "He just tried to assault me. Mother," I said, looking down at Caleb's distorted face. "If he wasn't my brother, he would be in handcuffs right now. Actually, he might be anyway." My father stepped forward, his face purple with rage. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You ungrateful traitor," he hissed. "I bought that ticket. I gave you the $2. It was my money that paid for it. That means the winnings are mine. It is a family asset. If you do not hand it over, I will sue you. I will drag you to court. I will freeze every asset you have until you are begging on the street. It was the ultimate threat. The threat of the powerful against the weak. The threat of legal ruin. I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf I had promised to become. Go ahead, Dad, I said softly. Sue me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't the ticket. It was a printout of the Redmond Holdings balance sheet I had pulled that morning. But before you call your lawyers, I continued, you should probably check your accounts. I know the firm has less than $10,000 in liquid cash. I know you haven't paid the retainer for your corporate counsel in 6 months, and I know that any lawyer worth their salt will want a massive deposit to take on a case against a blind trust that has $150 million in cash reserves. I took a step closer to him. He smelled of fear and stale scotch. Lawyers cost money, Richard, and you are broke. My father stared at the paper in my hand. He looked defeated. He looked old. You can't do this, he whispered. We are your family. No, I said, turning my back on them. You are my debtors, and I am done paying your bills. I looked at Stone. Escort them out. If they return, call the police and press charges for attempted assault and trespassing. Yes, ma'am, Stone said. He hauled Caleb up by the back of his coat. Caleb was sobbing now. The fight drained out of him, replaced by the terrifying reality of his situation. He looked at me with pleading eyes. Charlotte, please, Caleb begged, snot running down his nose. Vinny, he is going to kill me. You can't let them kill me. Just give me $5 million. That is all I need. Please. I paused near the elevator. I looked back at him. You should have thought about that before you bet your life, Caleb, I said. Enjoy the cruise. Oh, wait. You can't afford the ticket anymore. The elevator doors closed, cutting off the sight of my mother weeping on the lobby floor and my brother being dragged out by security. The silence in the elevator was heavy. Are you all right, Ms. Redmond? Stone asked gently. I took a deep breath. My hands were not shaking. My heart was beating steadily. I am fine. Stone, I said. Actually, I am better than fine. I am just getting started. But the war was far from over. I knew Caleb. Desperation made people dangerous, and my father wasn't done either. He would find a lawyer desperate enough to take the case on a contingency fee. They would come at me with everything they had. I needed to be ready. I needed to go on the offensive. I pulled out my phone and dialed David. It is done, I said when he answered. The bridge is burned. Now, I want to hire that investigative firm. No, not the cheap one they used. I want Blackstone Intel. I want to know everything about my father's business dealings for the last 20 years. I want the dirt he thinks he buried. Charlotte, David warned, if you dig that deep, you might find things you don't want to see. I don't care, I said, watching the numbers on the elevator climb. Find me the skeletons. David, I'm going to build a graveyard. The elevator dinged at the penthouse floor. I stepped out into my sanctuary. But as I walked toward the window to look down at the city, I noticed a reflection in the glass. It was me. But it wasn't the Charlotte I knew. The eyes were harder. The set of the jaw was ruthless. The transformation was happening. The sheep was dead. The wolf was hungry. And down on the street, far below, I saw the Lincoln Navigator pull away from the curb. They weren't going home. They were going to war. And I had the high ground. But as I watched, another car pulled out from a side street and began to follow them. A black sedan with tinted windows. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a private investigator. It was Vinny's men. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The shark smelled blood, and for the first time, I realized that my vengeance might not be the only thing that destroyed my family. They had invited monsters into their lives. And now, without my money to shield them, those monsters were coming for dinner. I walked to the minibar and poured a glass of sparkling water. I raised it to the empty room. To consequences, I whispered. The game had just moved to the next level, and I was holding all the aces. The legal summons arrived 72 hours later, served by a man with a cheap suit and a smirk that suggested he enjoyed ruining people's mornings. I was not surprised. My father was desperate, and desperate men do not go quietly into the night. They burn everything around them in hopes of signaling for help. They had found a lawyer, Marcus Thorne. I knew the name, of course. In the tight-knit world of Boston's legal and financial circles, Thorne was known as the Vulture. He did not take cases based on merit. He took them based on the potential for a payout. He was the ambulance chaser of corporate litigation, a man who would sue a grandmother for baking cookies if he thought he could get a settlement. My father could not afford Thorne's hourly rate, which meant they had struck a contingency fee. Thorne was likely promised 30% of the jackpot. That was $45 million, enough to make any lawyer ignore the stench of a frivolous lawsuit. I sat in David's office, the glass walls overlooking the Charles River. As he slid the filing across the polished mahogany desk, "They are claiming a verbal contract," David said, his voice flat with disbelief. "Specifically, they argue that the Redmond family has a long-standing tradition of a family pool for all gambling and lottery activities. They claim that the $2 ticket was purchased with family funds, which they define as money given to you by your father, and therefore, the proceeds are community property." "That is absurd," I said, flipping through the pages. "I have never pooled money with them. I have never even played the lottery before." "It does not matter if it is absurd," David replied, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It only matters if a judge thinks there is enough merit to hear the case, and unfortunately, Thorne found a judge who is up for re-election and loves a high-profile drama. Judge Holloway granted a temporary injunction this morning." My stomach tightened. "They froze the money." "Only half," David corrected quickly. "Holloway isn't completely incompetent. He froze 50% of the assets pending the outcome of the trial. You still have full access to the other $75 million. $75 million. It was still more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. But it was not about the money. It was about the principle. It was about the fact that even now, even after I had walked away, they were still trying to reach into my pocket and steal what was mine. "Let them freeze it," I said, tossing the file back onto the desk. "It just means the money sits in an escrow account earning interest while I destroy their argument." "It is not just the legal battle, Charlotte," David warned, turning his computer monitor toward me. "It is the court of public opinion. You need to see this." He opened a browser window. It was a live stream on TikTok. The account name was Real Caleb Redmond. I watched in horrified fascination. Caleb and Monica were sitting on a couch not in the family mansion. I noticed, but in a rented apartment that looked staged to appear modest yet cozy, Caleb was wearing a simple sweater, looking pale and tragic. Monica was holding his hand, wiping away a fake tear. "We never wanted to do this," Caleb said to the camera, his voice breaking. "We love our sister. We really do. But she has changed. Money changed her." "He is sick," Monica chimed in, looking directly into the lens. "Caleb has been battling a rare autoimmune condition for months. That cruise wasn't a party. It was a medical retreat. The sea air. The specialists in Europe. It was his last hope for a treatment." I scoffed out loud. "A medical retreat. It was a booze cruise to a non-extradition zone." "She knows this," Caleb continued on the screen. "We mortgaged our parents' home, their retirement sanctuary, to pay for my treatment. And when Charlotte won that money that came from a ticket Dad bought, she just left. She took the money that could save my life and vanished into a 5-star hotel. She abandoned us." The comments on the side of the screen were scrolling so fast they were a blur. "Heartless sister, eat the rich." How can someone do that to their dying brother? Justice for Caleb. "They are good," I admitted, feeling a cold fury rising in my chest. "They are lying through their teeth. But they are good actors." "The narrative is catching on," David said grimly. "The tabloids are picking it up. Lottery winner abandons dying brother. It is a classic villain story. Charlotte, and you are the villain." The harassment started that afternoon. My email inbox, which I thought was secure, was flooded with hate mail. People wishing me death. People threatening to fine me. When I left David's office to go back to the hotel, I saw red paint splashed across the side of my Honda Civic. The word "witch" was scrawled in dripping letters on the driver's side door. Reporters were camped outside the hotel. They shoved microphones in my face as Stone and his team pushed them back. "Is it true you stole your parents' retirement fund? Do you have no comment on your brother's illness? How does it feel to be the most hated woman in Boston?" I did not answer. I kept my sunglasses on and my head high. I did not give them the satisfaction of a reaction. In the world of PR, silence is often interpreted as guilt, but in the world of warfare, silence is strategic. You do not shout at your enemy. You flank them. I returned to the suite and made the call I had been preparing for. "Blackstone Intel," a voice answered. It was deep, distorted digitally. "We received your retainer." "I assume you have started digging," I said. "We have," the voice replied. "The Redmond family closet is not just full of skeletons, Ms. Redmond. It is a mass grave." "Tell me," I commanded, putting the phone on speaker and pulling out a notepad. "Let's start with your father," the investigator said. "Richard Redmond. Caleb is cleaner, legally speaking, but messier financially," the investigator said. "He is not just gambling on sports, he is leveraging company assets. We found a trail of promissory notes. He has been selling future contracts on Redmond Holdings properties that haven't even been built yet to private investors. It is a Ponzi scheme. He uses new investor money to pay off the old gambling debts. The whole house of cards is about to collapse. The $5 million he owes the loan shark, Vinny, is just the tip of the iceberg. The total debt is closer to $12 million. "Thank you," I said. "Send me the files, everything, every scanned receipt, every email, every forged signature. One more thing," the investigator added. "We found the holders of the company's debt. Redmond Holdings is technically insolvent. The bank is preparing to call in the loans, but they are hesitating because of your father's reputation. They are open to selling the debt to a third party to mitigate their risk." I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled in 2 days. "Buy it," I said. "Ms. Redmond. Buy all of it," I repeated, standing up and walking to the window. "Use the shell companies we set up. Purchase every single cent of debt that Redmond Holdings owes. I want to be their creditor. I want to own the air they breathe. It will cost approximately $8 million to buy the debt at 60 cents on the dollar," the investigator calculated. "Do it today," I ordered, "and send a package to the motel where Caleb is staying. I will text you the address." The next morning, the sun rose over a city that thought I was a monster, but I was busy becoming an owner. The transaction was seamless. By noon, Nemesis LLC was the primary creditor for Redmond Holdings. I owned the mortgage on the office building. I owned the liens on the construction equipment. I effectively owned the company. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger on the foreclosure just yet. I wanted to play with them. I wanted them to feel the fear. I had Blackstone deliver the package to the cheap motel on the outskirts of the city where Caleb and Monica were hiding out, pretending to be humble victims for their TikTok audience. I watched the delivery through a hacked security camera feed from the motel's parking lot, another perk of hiring the best intelligence firm in the business. A courier dropped a small black box at their door and knocked. Caleb opened the door. He looked terrible. The sick act wasn't entirely an act anymore. The stress of the loan sharks and the lie was eating him alive. He picked up the box and took it inside. I switched the feed to the audio bug Blackstone had planted in their room an hour before the delivery. "What is it?" Monica's voice asked. "Is it from a fan?" "Someone sending money." I heard the sound of cardboard ripping. Then, silence. "It is a clock," Caleb said, his voice confused. "A clock." "It is counting down," Caleb whispered. 72 hours. What does that mean?" There was a note. I knew exactly what it said because I had written it. "For the medical treatment you missed. Vinny is impatient, but your new creditor is worse. You have 72 hours to pay the $5 million, or the medical records go public. Tick-tock. It is her, Caleb screamed. I heard something shatter, probably a lamp. It is Charlotte. She knows about Vinny. She knows about the debt. What medical records? Monica asked, panic rising in her voice. Caleb, what is she talking about? She means the fraud, Caleb yelled. She knows we lied about the sickness. If that gets out, the GoFundMe money we raised is wire fraud. We will go to jail. You told me it was foolproof, Monica shrieked. I sat back in my chair, sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea. They were turning on each other. The pressure cooker was sealed, and I had just turned up the heat. But I wasn't done. I needed to address the public. I needed to dismantle the narrative they had built. But I wouldn't do it with a tearful apology video. I would do it with facts. I called David. Draft a press release, but do not release it to the tabloids. Send it to the financial editors of the Boston Globe and the Wall Street Journal. What is the headline? David asked. Forensic audit reveals Redmond Holdings insolvency. I said. Attach the documents showing the unpaid wages to the staff. Attach the proof of the second mortgage on my apartment with the forged signature Blackstone confirmed the forgery this morning. And attach the flight log showing that the medical retreat was booked on a cruise line known for high-stakes gambling. Not chemotherapy. You are going to nuke them, David said. This destroys the company's reputation permanently. The company is already dead, David, I said. I am just signing the death certificate. And the lawsuit, he asked. Thorne is pressing for a deposition date. Let him press, I said. Tell him I am ready. In fact, tell him I look forward to it. I want to see his face when I bring the evidence of my father's embezzlement from the community center project into the discovery phase. Tell Thorne that if he proceeds with the family pool argument, I will demand a full audit of all family finances going back 5 years to prove the existence of this alleged pool. Remind him that as an officer of the court, if he knowingly facilitates perjury regarding my father's hidden accounts, he will be disbarred. That is blackmail, David noted, though I could hear the smile in his voice. No, I corrected. It is leverage. I hung up the phone. The digital clock on my laptop screen flickered. The countdown I had sent Caleb was synchronized with my own timeline. 72 hours. In 72 hours, the loan sharks would make their move. In 72 hours, the press would publish the financial exposure. In 72 hours, the temporary injunction on my funds would likely be lifted when Thorne realized his clients were radioactive. I looked at the red paint on my car through the photo the valet had sent me. Witch. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was a witch. I was certainly brewing something wicked. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Nice clock. But clocks break, and so do people. Watch your back. Little girl. Vinny. The shark had entered the chat. I stared at the message. Most people would have called the police. Most people would have run. But I wasn't most people anymore. I was a woman with $75 million and a team of ex-Special Forces mercenaries in the room next door. I typed a reply. I am not the one who owes you money, but I am the only one who can pay. Let's talk. I hit send. The game of cat and mouse was over. It was time for the lions to meet. I had neutralized the legal threat. I was dismantling the public image. And now, I was going to invite the criminal element to the table. Not as a victim, but as a negotiator. I walked over to the mirror and adjusted my blazer. The reflection stared back cool, composed, and dangerous. The family pool was about to be drained, and I was going to make sure they all saw the sludge at the bottom before they drowned in it. The text message from Vinny was not an idle threat. It was a shifting of gears in a machine designed to grind people into dust. I knew how men like Vincent the Shark Moretti operated. They did not rely on the legal system. They relied on fear, pain, and the absolute certainty that they could touch you wherever you hid. My brother, Caleb, was the first to feel that touch. He was still holed up in that miserable motel on the outskirts of the city, the one where I had sent the countdown clock. He was pacing the room. the cheap carpet likely stained with the sweat of 1,000 desperate souls before him. He had ignored the clock for 12 hours. Convinced that his social media campaign against me would somehow generate enough cash to pay off the debt. He was delusional. Vinny did not care about TikTok views. According to the audio bug Blackstone Intel had planted, the door to room 104 did not open with a keycard. It exploded inward with the force of a battering ram. Caleb shrieked a high, thin sound like a trapped rabbit. "Time is up, golden boy," a gravelly voice boomed. That was Vinny. "No. Wait," Caleb stammered. The sound of furniture crashing suggesting he was scrambling backward. "I have a plan. I can pay you double." "You have nothing," Vinny snarled. "You have a maxed-out credit card and a sister who hates your guts." "She has the money," Caleb screamed, betraying me without a second of hesitation. "She has $150 million. It is cash. She is holding it in a trust. I can get it. If you help me pressure her. I will give you 10 million. No, 15 million. Just get the money from her." There was a silence on the tape, a heavy, calculating silence. 15 million, Vinny asked. "Yes, she is weak," Caleb lied, his voice trembling. "She is just a girl. She is scared. If you scare her enough, she will fold. She will sign it over to me, and then I pay you. Everybody wins." The recording ended there, but I knew what happened next. Vinny had left the room. He hadn't killed Caleb, not yet. Caleb was still useful as bait. But the shark had a new target, me. The escalation was immediate. That evening, as my convoy left the hotel to meet with David, a black SUV swerved in front of us on Boylston Street, forcing Stone to slam on the brakes. 2 men in leather jackets stepped out. They didn't draw weapons, not on a crowded street, but they stood there, blocking traffic, staring directly at me through the bulletproof glass of my car. One of them mimed a pistol with his hand, pointed it at me, and pulled the imaginary trigger. My phone buzzed. It was a picture message from an unknown number. It was a photo of a sniper rifle aimed at the front door of the Mandarin Oriental. "Next time we don't miss, tell your brother to pay up. Or you pay for him." Stone was already on the radio, barking orders to the driver to reverse and take an alternate route. His hand was on his holster. "We need to get you to a safe house," Stone said, his eyes scanning the rooftops. "This is getting too hot." "No," I said, staring at the picture on my phone. "If we run, they chase. If we hide, they burn the house down. We don't retreat. Stone, we negotiate." "Negotiate?" Stone looked at me like I was insane. "These are mobsters, Ms. Redmond. They don't negotiate, they execute." "Everyone negotiates," I corrected him, opening my laptop. "You just have to find the right currency. I didn't have weapons training. I didn't have muscle. But I had something Vinny didn't have. I had the ability to follow the money, back in the suite. While Stone doubled the guard detail, I went to work. I had the files Blackstone had sent me, the deep dive into my father's business history. I knew Caleb owed Vinny money. But why did Vinny lend $5 million to a known gambling addict like Caleb in the first place? Vinny was a loan shark. But he wasn't stupid. He usually required collateral. I dug into the property records of Redmond Holdings. 3 years ago, my father had launched a project called Vista Verde. It was supposed to be a luxury condo complex. The project never broke ground. My father claimed it was killed by zoning issues. The investors lost everything. One of the primary investors was a shell company called Apex Management. I traced Apex Management through a series of offshore registries in the Cayman Islands and Delaware. It took me 4 hours of forensic auditing, cross-referencing tax IDs and digital signatures. It was a maze designed to hide the owner's identity. But forensic accounting is about finding the one loose thread and pulling until the sweater unravels. I found the thread. Apex Management was owned by Vincent Moretti. Vinny had invested $2 million of clean money, or as clean as his money got, into my father's project. He was trying to legitimize his earnings. Then I looked at the disbursement ledgers for Vista Verde. My father hadn't lost the money to zoning issues. He had siphoned it out. He had moved the $2 million into a private account in Switzerland. then declared the project bankrupt. My father had stolen $2 million from the Boston Mafia, and Vinny didn't know. He thought it was just bad luck. I sat back, a cold smile touching my lips. I had the bullet. Now I just needed to load the gun. "Stone," I called out. "Get me a meeting with Moretti, tonight. Ms. Redmond. I strongly advise against—" "Set it up," I interrupted. "Tell him I know what happened to Apex Management. Tell him I found his $2 million. The meeting was set for midnight at an abandoned textile warehouse in the Seaport District. It was a cliché, but criminals are creatures of habit. They like the dark, the quiet, and the smell of rust. I arrived in the armored SUV. Stone had deployed a team of 4 men. 2 were with me, and 2 were positioned on the catwalks high above, invisible in the shadows. Their rifles trained on the center of the room. Vinny was waiting. He sat on a wooden crate under a single flickering halogen bulb. He was a large man, wearing a wool coat that looked expensive but fit poorly. He was surrounded by 3 thugs, the same ones who had blocked my car. I walked toward him. The click of my heels echoed in the vast, empty space. I stopped 10 feet away. "You have guts, lady," Vinny said, his voice echoing. "Or you are stupid. Your brother says you have my money." "My brother lies," I said calmly. "He tells you what you want to hear because he is terrified. I do not have your $5 million. Vincent," Vinny stood up. His men stepped forward. "Then why am I not killing you right now?" "Because you are a businessman," I said, holding up a thick manila envelope. "And you hate being played for a fool." I tossed the envelope at his feet. It landed with a heavy slap on the concrete. "What is this?" Vinny asked, eyeing the package suspiciously. "Open it," I commanded. He signaled to one of his men, who picked it up and handed it to him. Vinny tore it open. He pulled out the spreadsheets, the bank transfer records, and the emails I had printed. "3 years ago," I began, my voice steady, "you invested $2 million in the Vista Verde project through Apex Management. My father, Richard Redmond, told you the project died because the city refused the permits. He told you the money was gone, spent on architects and lawyers." Vinny looked at the papers. His eyes narrowed as he read the highlighted figures. "Look at page 4, I directed. "That is a wire transfer dated 2 days after you deposited your funds. The money didn't go to architects. It went to a numbered account in Zurich. The beneficiary is Richard Redmond." Vinny froze. The air in the warehouse seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He stole it," Vinny whispered, the sound more terrifying than his shout. "He stole it," I confirmed. "He looked you in the eye, shook your hand, and stole $2 million from you. He used your money to buy his wife a diamond necklace and a summer home in the Hamptons. And then, he let you lend another $5 million to his son, knowing full well the company was insolvent and could never pay you back." Vinny crushed the papers in his massive hand. The vein in his neck was throbbing. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at a ghost of my father, and the hatred in his eyes was primal. "Why are you telling me this?" Vinny asked, looking back at me. "You are a Redmond." "I am a Redmond in name only," I said. "They tried to destroy me. They stole my home. They left me for dead. I owe them nothing." I took a step forward. "Here's the deal. Vincent, you leave me alone. You never threaten me, my staff, or my property again. In exchange, I give you the green light." "The green light. I own the debt of Redmond Holdings now," I said. "I could foreclose and take everything tomorrow, but I'm willing to wait. I will hold off on my legal claims for 48 hours. That gives you a window." "A window to do what?" "To collect," I said cold. "My father has assets that are not tied to the company. Hidden watches, offshore accounts, art collections. Caleb has hidden cash stashed away. You get it all. You strip them clean. You take back your $2 million, plus the $5 million Caleb owes you, plus interest." I paused, locking eyes with him. "But there is one condition: no bodies. You do not kill them. If they die, the police get involved, and I will hand this entire file on your money laundering operation to the FBI. You leave them alive, but destitute. Do we have an accord?" Vinny looked at me for a long moment. Then, a slow, grudging respect spread across his face. He realized that the woman standing in front of him was not a victim. She was a fellow predator. "You are colder than your old man," Vinny said. "He was a thief. You are an executioner." "Do we have a deal?" I repeated. Vinny nodded once. "We have a deal. No bodies. Just poverty." He turned to his men. "Let's go. We have a visit to make." They left the warehouse, their tires screeching as they sped away into the night. I stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. Stone stepped out from the shadows. "That was intense," Stone said. "It is not over," I said, walking back to the SUV. That was just the authorization. 2 hours later, Vinny made good on his word. He didn't go to my parents' house first. He went back to the motel. Caleb was waiting for a miracle. Instead, he got judgment. I didn't see it, but the report I received later from my surveillance team was graphic. Vinny didn't kill him. He wanted Caleb to deliver a message. Vinny's men held Caleb down on the dirty motel floor. Vinny leaned over him. "Your sister says hello," Vinny whispered, "and she told me what your father did with my money." There was a sickening crack. Vinny broke Caleb's index finger, the finger he used to point at people, the finger he used to tap on his phone to gamble away millions. It was a precise, calculated injury, painful enough to traumatize, but not enough to kill. "You have 24 hours, Vinny told the sobbing, broken man on the floor. "I want $7 million in cash and assets by tomorrow night, or I take another finger, and then I take your tongue." They left Caleb there, cradling his shattered hand. Caleb didn't call the police. He couldn't. He knew Vinny would kill him if he talked. He did the only thing a coward knows how to do. He ran to Mommy. He drove to the Redmond estate with one hand, blinded by tears and pain. He burst into the house at 3 a.m, waking my parents. "Mom, Dad," Caleb screamed, collapsing in the foyer, blood dripping from his hand onto the expensive Persian rug. My mother rushed down the stairs in her silk robe, screaming when she saw the blood. My father followed, looking pale and confused. "My hand! He broke my hand," Caleb wailed. Who did this?" Evelyn shrieked, clutching him. "The shark Vinny," Caleb sobbed. He knows everything. Charlotte told him. She told him about the Vista Verde money, Dad. She told him you stole it." My father stopped dead on the stairs. He grabbed the banister to keep from falling. His face turned the color of ash. "She told him," Richard whispered. "He wants $7 million, Caleb cried. "By tomorrow night, or he is coming back to kill us all," I had to tell him. "Mom, I had to tell him I sold us out to him. I had to tell him about the debts. We are dead. We are dead." My mother looked from her bleeding son to her terrified husband. The reality of their situation finally crashed down on her. The money was gone. The reputation was gone. And now, the monsters they had thought were just stories were standing at their gate, holding a bill that had come due. And somewhere in the city, in a warm hotel suite, the daughter they had thrown away was sleeping soundly, having just signed the permission slip for their destruction. The invitation arrived via courier at noon. Less than 12 hours after Vinny had collected his down payment in bone and blood, it was on heavy, cream-colored stationery, the kind my mother used for her charity galas, embossed with the Redmond family crest. It was a summons to a reconciliation dinner at L'Espalier, the most exclusive restaurant in Boston. It was not an invitation. It was a white flag. They were cornered. Their assets were frozen by the court injunction. Their reputation was in tatters thanks to the financial leaks I had orchestrated. And most terrifying of all, the sharks were circling. Caleb had less than 24 hours to produce $7 million before Vinny came back for the rest of him. They had no liquidity, no allies, and no time. Their only option was to beg the daughter they had discarded to save them. I looked at the invitation and felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. They wanted a settlement. They wanted to sit down and divide the spoils. They thought that if they offered me enough money that was already mine, I would sign a piece of paper and make the monsters go away. I called David. "Accept the invitation," I told him. "But on my terms. We eat in the main dining room, not a private salon, and tell them I am bringing a revised agreement." "Charlotte," David cautioned, "they are desperate. Desperate animals bite. Are you sure you want to be in a room with them?" "I am not going there to eat, David," I replied, staring at my reflection in the hotel mirror. "I am going there to feed." I spent the afternoon preparing for war. I did not dress like the forensic accountant who faded into the background. I did not dress like the failure daughter in her sensible wool coats. I went to the finest boutique on Newbury Street and bought a dress that screamed power. It was silk, the color of fresh arterial blood, cut sharp at the shoulders and plunging at the back. It fit like a second skin. I went to the vault in the hotel and retrieved a diamond necklace I had purchased that morning. It was a choker of raw, uncut diamonds, looking more like ice shards than jewelry. When I put it on, it felt cold against my throat. I looked like a queen who had just executed her enemies. I arrived at the restaurant at 8 o'clock sharp. Stone and his team secured the perimeter. But I walked in alone. The maitre d', who usually looked down his nose at anyone who wasn't a senator or a CEO, bowed low. "Right this way. Ms. Redmond, your party is waiting." He led me through the hushed, candle-lit dining room. The air smelled of truffles and old money. At the center table, the Redmond family sat in a tableau of misery. My father, Richard, looked 10 years older than he had 2 days ago. His skin was gray, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting the FBI or a hitman to jump out from behind the curtains. My mother, Evelyn, was wearing a black dress that looked more appropriate for a funeral. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together on the tablecloth. And then there was Caleb. He was sitting on the edge of his chair, sweating profusely. His right hand was heavily bandaged, a bulky white mass that stood out against his dark suit. His face was pale, his eyes wide and dilated, likely from painkillers. Monica sat next to him, looking like a deer in headlights, her usual arrogance replaced by pure terror. Marcus Thorne, their vulture of a lawyer, sat at the head of the table. He looked nervous. He knew the ship was sinking, and he was trying to figure out if he could loot the pantry before he jumped off. When I approached the table, the silence was absolute. The click of my heels on the parquet floor was the only sound in the universe. "Charlotte," my mother breathed, standing up. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "You look magnificent. That color suits you." "Sit down, Mother," I said, my voice smooth and hard. "We are not here to discuss fashion." I took my seat opposite them. I did not offer a greeting. I did not smile. I signaled the waiter. "A bottle of your finest Cabernet," I ordered. "Something deep, something complex." Thorne cleared his throat, shuffling a stack of documents. "Ms. Redmond, thank you for agreeing to meet. We are all hoping to put this misunderstanding behind us. My clients, your family, want to propose a settlement that is fair to everyone." He slid a leather-bound folder across the table toward me. "The proposal is simple," Thorne said, his voice slick. "We drop the lawsuit regarding the family pool claim. We issue a joint statement clarifying that the dispute was a private matter. In exchange, the lottery winnings will be divided. You, Charlotte, will retain 60%. That is $90 million. The remaining 40%, $60 million, will go to the family trust to cover existing obligations and future investments." $60 million. That was exactly enough to pay off Vinny, pay off the bank debts I had secretly bought, and leave them with a comfortable cushion to continue their fake lives. Caleb looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Char, please, it is a good deal. You get the majority. You get 90 million. You will never have to work again. We just need our share. To fix things." To fix the fact that you owe $7 million to a loan shark by midnight. I asked. Caleb flinched as if I had slapped him. Monica let out a small whimper. It is a generous offer, Charlotte, my father said, his voice raspy. We are your parents. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. Surely that is worth 40%. And the mortgage? I asked, looking him dead in the eye. The one you took out on my apartment behind my back, was that part of raising me? It was a mistake, my mother interjected. Reaching across the table to touch my hand, I pulled back before she could make contact. We were desperate. Darling, we didn't want to hurt you. We just wanted to help Caleb. You know how sensitive he is. Monica leaned in, her voice dripping with syrup. Charlotte, you know how much they love you. And honestly, 60% is amazing. Think of the clothes, the trips. We could go shopping together in Paris, just like sisters. We could start over. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were terrified. Yes, but they were not sorry. There was no remorse in their eyes. There was only calculation. They were calculating how much they had to debase themselves to get the money. They were calculating how quickly they could get back to their country club lives once I signed the check. I picked up the wine glass the waiter had just filled. The liquid was dark red, swirling against the crystal. I have a question, I said softly. The table went quiet. Even Thorne stopped shuffling his papers. Why? I asked. Why what? Honey, my mother asked. Why did you treat me like garbage? I asked. My voice remaining level, but carrying across the table like a gunshot. For 34 years, you ignored me. You mocked my career. You made me sit at the kids' table. You gave me a $2 ticket while you gave him a $15,000 cruise. Why was I not smart enough? Was I not pretty enough? What was my crime? My father sighed, looking annoyed that we were dwelling on the past. Charlotte, don't be dramatic. We didn't treat you like garbage. We just knew you were strong. Caleb needed more help. He is fragile. You were always the independent one. We thought you could handle it. So you punished me for being competent, I asked. It wasn't punishment, my mother insisted. We were just allocating resources where they were needed. You didn't need us. Caleb did. I needed parents, I said. I didn't need resources. I needed a mother who didn't look at me like a disappointment because I didn't marry a hedge fund manager. I needed a father who didn't steal my house. We are saying sorry, Caleb snapped, the pain in his hand making him irritable. What else do you want? Blood just signed the paper. Charlotte Vinny is coming. Do you understand? He's going to cut off my fingers. He's going to kill me. That sounds like a you problem. Caleb, I said. You are a monster, Monica hissed. He is your brother. And I am the bank, I replied. I opened the leather folder. The contract was there, printed on thick bond paper. Settlement agreement, 60-40 split. I took a gold pen from my purse. It was heavy. I will sign, I said. The relief in the room was palpable. My father slumped back in his chair, exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. My mother clasped her hands in prayer. Caleb squeezed his eyes shut, tears leaking out. Thorne smirked, already calculating his cut of the $60 million. Thank you, Charlotte, my father said. You are doing the right thing. Family comes first. I uncapped the pen. However, I said, there is a typo in the percentages. A typo? Thorne asked, frowning. My paralegal checked it 3 times. The numbers are wrong, I said. I pressed the pen to the paper, with 2 swift, aggressive strokes. I crossed out the 60% next to my name and the 40% next to the Redmond Family Trust. I wrote in new numbers. I turned the folder around and slid it back to Thorne. He looked down at it. His eyes bulged behind his rimless glasses. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Ms. Redmond, Thorne stammered. This says, read it, I commanded. It says Charlotte Redmond, 100%, Thorne read, his voice shaking. Redmond Family Trust, 0%. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before, It was the silence of a bomb that had just landed but hadn't detonated yet. "What?" Caleb whispered. "I am keeping it all," I said, leaning back and taking a sip of wine. "Every cent, $150 million. You get nothing. Zero, nada." "You can't do that," my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "We had a verbal agreement. We are here to settle." "This is the settlement," I said coolly. "You settle for nothing, or I drag this out in court for 5 years. I have the money to pay lawyers until you are all living in a shelter. I own your debts. I own your mortgage. I own the company. And now, I own the jackpot. You have nothing left to bargain with." "You bitch," Caleb screamed. He lost all control. The terror, the pain, the entitlement, it all exploded. He lunged forward and flipped the heavy table. Crystal glasses shattered. Plates of appetizers crashed to the floor. The bottle of expensive Cabernet flew through the air and smashed against the wall, spraying red liquid like a crime scene. Caleb scrambled over the debris, his good hand reaching for my throat. "I will kill you. Give me the money. I need the money," my mother screamed. My father fell back in his chair, clutching his chest. I did not move. I did not flinch. I sat in my chair, which was untouched by the chaos, looking at Caleb as he struggled to reach me over the overturned table. Stone was there in a heartbeat, grabbing Caleb by the collar and throwing him backward onto the floor. Caleb landed on the broken glass, howling in pain. "Enough!" I shouted. My voice cut through the screaming. I stood up, smoothing the front of my red dress. I looked down at my family, broken, violent, and pathetic. "You wanted a show?" I asked. "You wanted the world to know the truth about the Redmond family." I raised my hand and pointed to the tables around us. "Look," throughout the dining room. The guests, who had been quietly eating their dinners, stood up. They weren't diners. They pulled out professional cameras from under their coats. They lifted smartphones that were already streaming live. I had bought out the entire restaurant for the night. Every single person in the room, other than the staff, was a reporter or a cameraman I had invited. "Say hello to the Boston Globe," I said, pointing to a man in a gray suit. "And Channel 5 News." I pointed to a woman holding a microphone she had just pulled from her purse. "And of course, a live feed to your favorite platform. Caleb, TikTok." Caleb looked around, his face white with horror. He realized that his violent outburst, his threats, his admission of the debt, it had all been captured. High definition, live. "No," my mother whimpered, covering her face with her hands. "No, please." "You tried to paint me as the villain," I said, my voice projecting to the cameras. "You told the world I abandoned a dying brother. Well, the world just saw the dying brother flip a table and try to strangle his sister for money. The world just heard you admit that the treatment was a payment to a loan shark." I walked over to where my father was slumped, looking like a ghost. "You asked why I treated you like this," I said to him. "Because you taught me. You taught me that money is the only thing that matters. You taught me that love is transactional. So, I closed the account." I turned to the cameras. The flashbulbs were starting to pop, blinding white lights that exposed every flaw, every drop of sweat on their faces. "The settlement is rejected," I announced to the press. "There will be no negotiation. I am the sole winner." And these people, I gestured to my family, who were cowering on the floor amidst the broken glass and spilled wine. "They are strangers to me." I turned on my heel, the red dress swirling around my legs. Stone cleared a path for me through the stunned reporters. "Charlotte!" my mother screamed after me, a raw, desperate sound. "Charlotte, don't leave us. He will kill him. Vinny will kill him tonight." I stopped at the door. I looked back over my shoulder. "Then you better start selling the jewelry, Mother," I said. "I hear pawn shops open early." I walked out into the cool night air. The door of the restaurant closed behind me, muffling the chaos inside. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like winter and gasoline and victory. I had not come there to share money. I had come to buy my freedom. and the receipt was printed in their tears. The heavy oak doors of l'Espalier swung shut behind me, muffling the cacophony of shattering glass and screaming voices. But the silence was short-lived. I had barely taken 3 steps onto the damp pavement of Boylston Street, the cold winter air biting at my exposed skin. When the doors burst open again, they came after me. Of course they did. Parasites do not let go of their host just because the host stops feeding them. They dig in deeper. "Charlotte, you get back here." It was my mother, Evelyn. She had lost her shoes. She was running across the cobblestones in stocking feet, her black dress torn at the hem, her face a mask of mascara and terror. My father, Richard, stumbled behind her, looking like a man who was actively having a stroke, and Caleb, supported by Monica, was limping after them, cradling his broken hand and cursing the world. The wall of reporters I had invited was waiting. They formed a semicircle around the entrance, their cameras raised like weapons. I stopped. I turned around. I could have kept walking. I could have gotten into the armored SUV that Stone had waiting at the curb and vanished. But I wasn't done. I had taken their money. I had taken their reputation. But I hadn't taken their lie. And the lie was the only thing holding them together. "You cannot leave," Evelyn shrieked, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "You cannot do this to us. We are your family. We are your blood." I looked down at her hand on my arm. The diamonds I wore around my neck felt heavy, freezing against my skin. "Blood," I repeated, the word tasting like copper in my mouth. "That is an interesting word choice, Evelyn." "We raised you," she cried, playing to the cameras that were zooming in on her tear-streaked face. "I carried you for 9 months. I gave birth to you. Doesn't that mean anything? How can a child be so cruel to the mother who gave her life?" The crowd murmured. Even the cynical reporters were swaying slightly. It was a powerful biological argument, the sacred bond of motherhood. It was the last shield she had. I reached into my clutch. I bypassed my phone. I bypassed the checkbook. I pulled out a folded white envelope. It wasn't a legal document from a lawyer. It was a medical report from a genetics lab in Cambridge. "You talk about carrying me," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the wind. "You talk about giving birth, but you and I both know that is the biggest lie of all." I ripped the envelope open. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. "I have suspected it for years," I said, holding the paper up so the cameras could capture the letterhead. "I never looked like you. I never felt like you. And you never treated me like a daughter. You treated me like a sin you were forced to keep." "Charlotte, don't," my father whispered. He had caught up to us, and when he saw the paper, his face went from gray to a sickly white. "Please. Not here. Not in front of them." "What is that?" Caleb sneered, leaning against a lamppost, his eyes glassy. "Another bill." "It is a DNA test," I announced. "I ran it last week. I compared my genetic markers against yours, Evelyn, and against yours, Richard." I looked at my mother. The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she would faint. She knew. She had always known. "The results are conclusive," I said. "Richard Redmond is my biological father. That part is true. But you, Evelyn, we share 0% of our DNA. You are not my mother." The gasp from the press corps was audible. The cameras flashed rapidly, a strobe light of exposure. "You are a liar," Monica shouted, trying to defend her meal ticket. "She is lying. She is just trying to hurt you." "I am not lying," I said, stepping closer to my father. "Tell them, Richard, tell them who my mother really was. Tell them about the secretary you had 35 years ago, the one named Sarah." My father looked down at his shoes. He was trembling. He was a small, broken man who had built a life on deception. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely a croak. "Sarah was 22, I said, reciting the facts I had dug up with Blackstone Intel's help. "She worked in your filing department. You had an affair. You got her pregnant. And when she refused to get an abortion, you panicked. You didn't want to ruin your marriage to the heiress of the Sterling family fortune. So you made a deal with Evelyn." I turned to Evelyn. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask of the grieving mother was gone. This was the face I had seen in the shadows of my childhood, the face of a woman looking at a rival. "You agreed to take the baby," I said to Evelyn. "Not because you wanted me, but because you wanted to control Richard. You wanted to hold his indiscretion over his head for the rest of his life. You agreed to raise me as your own to avoid the scandal of an illegitimate child. But you hated me. Every time you looked at me, you didn't see a daughter. You saw the woman your husband slept with." "She was a whore," Evelyn spat. The venom in her voice was shocking. "She was a nothing, a little gold digger who thought she could trap him. I saved this family. I took you in when I should have left you in a dumpster." The crowd went silent. The cameras were rolling. The live stream was broadcasting this confession to millions of viewers. "You didn't take me in," I said cold. "You took a hostage. That is why you made me work for my allowance when Caleb got everything for free. That is why you made me sleep in the smallest room. That is why you sabotaged my relationships, mocked my career, and tried to break my spirit. You were punishing the other woman through me." "And you deserved it," Evelyn hissed, her eyes wild. "You have her eyes, those defiant, common eyes. I hated looking at you every single day." I felt a strange sense of relief. The pain didn't vanish, but the confusion did. I finally understood. I wasn't unlovable. I was just the enemy. "And you knew," I said, turning to Caleb. "Didn't you?" Caleb laughed. It was a jagged, broken sound. "Of course I knew. Mom told me when I was 12. She told me I was the real heir, the pure blood. You were just the bastard. That is why you were born to serve me. Charlotte, that is the natural order. You work, I spend. You fix, I break. That is your job. You are the help." "The help," I repeated. "And that is why you felt entitled to my house, to my money, to my life." "It is my money," Caleb screamed, pushing off the lamppost. "You are not even a real Redmond. You are a mistake. Dad should have let that crazy bitch rot in the street." "Don't call her that," I warned, my voice dropping an octave. "Crazy. She was crazy," Caleb yelled, his face twisted with malice and pain. "Why do you think Dad got custody? Because she was insane. That is why they locked her up. That is why she died in a padded room." I froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. The traffic noise, the camera shutters, the wind had all faded into a buzzing white noise. "What did you say?" I asked. My investigator had told me Sarah died of pneumonia when I was 2. The record said she was indigent, living in a state facility. "She died of sickness," I said, my voice shaking for the first time. "She was sick. She was crazy because we made her crazy." Caleb laughed, the painkillers loosening his tongue, destroying the final filter. "Mom and Dad fixed it. They fixed the problem. The doctor said she was fine. But Dad paid them. He paid them to say she was a danger to herself. They falsified the charts. They put her in the asylum so they could take you to protect the family image." My father looked up, horror written on his face. "Caleb, shut up." But it was too late. The words were out. The bell had been rung. I looked at my father. "Is that true?" Richard started to cry. He covered his face with his hands. "We had to. She wouldn't give you up. She was going to go to the press. She was going to ruin my merger with the Sterling Group. We needed leverage. Doctor, Arrington, he owed me a favor. We just needed her declared incompetent for a few months, just until the custody hearing was over." "And then?" I asked, stepping closer. "What happened then?" "She deteriorated," Richard sobbed. "The medication they gave her, the shock therapy. She wasn't crazy when she went in. Charlotte, but the place it broke her. She stopped eating. She died a year later." I stood there, processing the horror of it. They hadn't just neglected my mother. They hadn't just had an affair. They had kidnapped me. They had framed an innocent woman. They had used their wealth and influence to gaslight a young mother, lock her in an institution, and drug her until she died. They had murdered her. It was a slow, bureaucratic murder, but it was murder all the same. And they had done it to protect their money, to protect the family image that I had just spent the last week dismantling. The rage that filled me then was not the cold, calculating anger of the forensic accountant. It was a hot, volcanic fury. It was the rage of a daughter who had been sleeping next to her mother's killers for 30 years. I looked at Evelyn. She wasn't ashamed. She looked annoyed that the secret was out. But she didn't look guilty. In her mind, Sarah was just an obstacle she had removed. "You monsters," I whispered. "We did what was necessary," Evelyn snapped. "We gave you a life of privilege. We gave you the Redmond name. You should be thanking us instead of trying to destroy us." I raised the DNA test in my hand. I crumpled it into a ball. "I am not a Redmond," I said. "I never was." I threw the crumpled paper at Evelyn. It hit her in the face, a light blow physically, but symbolically. It was a stone. "You are not my mother," I said, my voice rising, trembling with the sheer force of my hatred. "You are my jailer. You are the warden who killed my mother and forced me to serve her sentence." "Charlotte, please," my father begged, reaching for me. "We can explain. It was a different time." "Don't touch me," I screamed. I backed away from them. I looked at the camera lens closest to me. The red light was steady. The world was watching. "You heard them," I said to the camera. "You heard the confession, false imprisonment, medical malpractice, fraud, conspiracy." I pointed at my father. "That man is not a businessman. He is a predator." I pointed at Evelyn. "That woman is not a socialite. She is an accomplice." I pointed at Caleb. "And that man is the rot that grows from a poisoned root." The sound of sirens cut through the night. The police were coming. Not because I had called them, but because Stone had. He had signaled the detail the moment Caleb mentioned the falsified records. This was no longer a civil dispute. This was a criminal confession. "It is over," I said to them. "The money is the least of your problems now." Caleb looked around. Hearing the sirens, panic set in. No, I didn't mean it. I was high. I made it up." "It is on tape, Caleb," I said. "And I have the money to dig up Dr. Arrington's old files. I will exhume her body if I have to. I will find the drugs in her bone marrow. I will prove what you did." I turned my back on them. "Charlotte," my father cried out. "Where are you going?" "To find my mother," I said, not looking back. "The real one." I walked toward the waiting SUV. Stone opened the door for me. I climbed inside, the heavy door thudding shut, sealing me off from the madness. "Drive," I ordered. "Where to?" "Ms. Redmond," the driver asked. "Mount Hope Cemetery," I said. "The Potter's Field." Section D. I knew where she was buried. I had found the record years ago but never visited, thinking it was just a grave of a woman who didn't want me. Now I knew she was a martyr. As the car pulled away, I looked out the tinted window. I saw the police cruisers pulling up. I saw the officers stepping out. I saw my family being surrounded not by adoring fans, but by the law. Evelyn was screaming. Richard was slumped against the wall. Caleb was trying to run, but his broken hand and the drugs made him stumble. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a deep, hollow ache in my chest. I had won the game. I had destroyed the enemy, but the cost was higher than I ever imagined. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Twitter. The hashtag justice. For Sarah was already trending #1 worldwide. The public had turned. The hate mail in my inbox stopped. It was replaced by an avalanche of apologies and support, but I didn't care about their pity. I sat back in the leather seat and touched the diamonds at my throat. They felt like a collar. I unclasped the necklace and let it drop onto the seat beside me. I was free, but for the first time, I realized that freedom was not just about escaping a cage. It was about understanding why you were put there in the first place. And now that I knew, I had one final task. I had to bury the Redmond name, and then I had to resurrect Sarah's. The sun did not rise over Boston the next morning. It assaulted the city. The light was harsh, unforgiving, and stripped away the shadows where my family had hidden their rot for decades. I had not slept. There is no sleep when you are the conductor of an execution. I sat in the back of the armored SUV, parked across the street from the glass-fronted headquarters of Redmond Holdings, drinking black coffee that tasted like battery acid. I had pulled the trigger the moment I left the restaurant. I had called David and uttered a single word: execute. That word activated the clauses in the debt purchase agreements I had signed 2 days prior. I was no longer just the daughter they had abused. I was the senior creditor of their entire existence. I held the mortgage on the office tower. I held the liens on the construction equipment. I held the notes on the operating loans. And because the company was technically insolvent, a fact my forensic audit had proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, I had the legal right to call in every single penny immediately. At 8 a.m, the dominoes began to fall. It started with a convoy of black sedans and police cruisers screeching to a halt in front of the office building. It wasn't just the local sheriff serving an eviction notice. It was the Economic Crimes Unit, the IRS, and the FBI. I watched through the tinted glass as men in blue windbreakers swarmed the lobby. I saw the receptionist, a woman who had once sneered at me when I asked to see my father, stand up in terror as her phone lines were cut. The agents weren't there for a chat. They were there for the servers. I had given them everything: the duplicate ledgers I found in the cloud, the emails detailing the money laundering scheme with Vinny's Apex Management, and the proof of the tax evasion on the Vista Verde project. The doors to the building burst open, and employees began to stream out, clutching boxes of personal belongings, looking confused and frightened. They were the innocent casualties of my father's greed, and I made a mental note to set up a severance fund for them later. But right now, I needed to see the captains go down with the ship. My phone buzzed. It was the lead sheriff. "We have secured the commercial premises. Ms. Redmond," he said. "We are moving to the residential asset now." "I am right behind you," I said. The drive to the Redmond estate took 20 minutes. Usually, this drive filled me with dread. Today, it felt like a victory lap. When we arrived, the iron gates, the ones that had been shut to me on Thanksgiving, were wide open. A police cruiser was parked sideways across the entrance. Inside the house, chaos reigned. My mother, Evelyn, was running up and down the grand staircase, clutching a Louis Vuitton bag, trying to shove silverware into it. She was still wearing the torn dress from the night before, her makeup smeared like a clown's. "You cannot do this," she screamed at the deputies who were cataloging the furniture. "This is my house. I am Evelyn Redmond. Do you know who I am?" "You are a trespasser, ma'am," a deputy said, not looking up from his clipboard. "The bank has foreclosed. You have 2 hours to vacate the premises. Personal items only. No assets. That means no art, no jewelry, no silver." "The bank," Evelyn shrieked. "We have an arrangement with the bank." "I am the bank," I said, stepping through the front door. Evelyn spun around. She looked at me with eyes that were no longer human. They were the eyes of a trapped rat. "You," she hissed. "You did this." "I bought the note. Evelyn," I said, walking past her to run a hand along the mahogany banister. "Technically, you have been living in my house for 48 hours without paying rent. I am just formalizing the eviction." "Where will we go?" she wailed. Dropping the bag, silver forks clattered onto the marble floor. "We have nowhere to go." "I hear the homeless shelter on 4th Street has openings," I said. "It is the same one you threatened to send me to when I was 16 and got a B in math." Before she could lung at me, a commotion erupted in the driveway. A K-9 unit was barking furiously at Caleb's Porsche Cayenne. "We have a hit," an officer shouted. I walked to the window. Caleb was standing by the car, looking dazed. He was still wearing his suit from the dinner, now stained and rumpled. Monica was standing next to him, her arms crossed, looking strangely calm. The officer popped the trunk. He pulled out the spare tire well lining, Underneath were 3 large, vacuum-sealed bags of white crystals. Crystal meth. "That is not mine," Caleb screamed, his voice cracking. "I don't do meth. I gamble. I drink. I don't sell drugs." "It is in your car, sir," the officer said. Snapping handcuffs onto Caleb's good wrist and his broken one, Caleb howled in pain as the metal bit into his fracture. I frowned. Caleb was a degenerate. Yes, but he was a lazy degenerate. Drug trafficking required effort and logistics that he didn't possess. He was a user, not a dealer. I looked at Monica. She caught my eye through the window. She gave a tiny, imperceptible nod. I understood immediately. I walked outside. Monica broke away from the police line and hurried toward me. She looked like she was expecting a hug. "Charlotte," she breathless. "Did you see I did it? I helped you." "Helped me?" I asked, stopping her with a raised hand. "I planted it," Monica whispered, leaning in close, her perfume smelling of desperation. "I put the stuff in his car this morning while he was passed out. I knew the police were coming. I knew you wanted him gone. I did this for us. Charlotte, I am on your side. I can testify against him. I can say he was running a ring. Just tell them to let me go. Tell them to let me keep my jewelry." I looked at her. She was willing to send her husband to federal prison for 20 years just to save her Cartier bracelet. It was the most Redmond thing I had ever seen, and she wasn't even a blood relative. "You are disgusting," I said. Monica's smile faltered. "What? But I helped you. We are sisters." "We are not sisters," I said, "and I don't need your help to bury Caleb. He dug his own grave." I reached into my purse. I pulled out 5 crisp $100 bills. I shoved them into her hand. "Here," I said. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the money. $500. "It is taxi fare." I said, "Get off my property. If you are still here in 5 minutes, I will tell the officers that you had a key to the car and let them check your fingerprints on those bags." Monica's face went pale. She clutched the money, looked at the house one last time, the house she thought would be her palace, and then turned and ran down the driveway, her high heels clicking on the asphalt until she disappeared onto the main road. Inside the house, a thud echoed from the library. "Richard!" Evelyn screamed. I walked back inside. My father was lying on the floor, clutching his chest. His face was a terrifying shade of purple. He was gasping for air, his eyes rolling back in his head, the stress, the shock, the ruin his heart had finally given out. "Call 911!" Evelyn shrieked at the deputies. "Do something, he is dying." The paramedics arrived within minutes. They loaded him onto a stretcher. One of them looked at me. "Are you the next of kin?" he asked. "I am," I said. "We need his insurance information for the hospital admission." The paramedic said, "We are taking him to Mass General." I pulled out my phone. I had access to the family accounts or what was left of them. I checked the health insurance status. "Policy canceled," the screen read. "Non-payment of premiums." They hadn't paid their health insurance in 6 months. They had gambled that money away, assuming they were invincible. "He has no insurance," I told the paramedic. "Okay," the paramedic said, looking concerned. "We will still treat him, obviously, but without insurance or a credit card on file for a deposit, we cannot put him in the VIP cardiac wing. It will be the general ward." Evelyn grabbed my arm. "Charlotte, pay them, use the black card. He needs the best doctors. He needs a private room." I looked at my father on the stretcher. He was conscious, barely. He was looking at me, for the first time in his life. He wasn't looking at me with disdain. He was looking at me with fear. He knew I held his life in my wallet. "Charlotte," he wheezed. "Please." I looked at the paramedic. "Standard room," I said clearly. "He goes to the general ward, just like everyone else." "You evil witch!" Evelyn screamed, trying to claw at my face. "He is your father." "He is a stranger," I corrected her. "And strangers don't get VIP treatment on my dime." They wheeled him out. Evelyn tried to follow, but a detective in a suit stepped in front of her. "Evelyn Redmond," he asked. "Yes, I need to go to the hospital." "You are under arrest," the detective said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Arrest for what?" "Forgery," the detective said. "We have the documents regarding the unauthorized second mortgage on the property at 42 Elm Street. We also have a statement from your husband implicating you in the conspiracy to defraud the state regarding the custody of Charlotte Redmond 30 years ago." Evelyn froze. The fight went out of her. She realized that Richard, in his panic, or perhaps in a moment of spite before his heart gave out, had thrown her under the bus to try and save himself. They were eating each other alive until the very end. "I am a Redmond," she whispered as the cuffs clicked shut. "Not anymore," I said. I watched as they led her away. She didn't look back. She was already shrinking, her posture collapsing, becoming the old, bitter woman she truly was. Outside, the chaos had shifted. The police were searching the grounds for Caleb. He had vanished. "He ran out the back," a deputy shouted. Through the servants' entrance, he headed for the woods. I walked to the back terrace. The woods behind the estate were dense, leading down to the river. It was a foolish place to run. It was cold, and there was nowhere to go, unless someone was waiting for him. I picked up my phone. I had a tracking app open. Not on Caleb, but on the car that had been idling a mile down the road for the last hour. A black sedan registered to a shell company I knew belonged to Vinny. The dot on the map moved. It intercepted the area where Caleb had run. I didn't need to see it to know what happened. Caleb had escaped the police. Yes, he thought he was clever. He thought he could outrun the law, but he ran straight into the arms of the shark. Vinny was not a man who forgave a $7 million debt. And now that Caleb had no money, no family, and no drugs to sell, he had only one thing left to offer: his existence. I turned off the phone. Caleb was gone. Whether he ended up in a river or working off his debt in some hellhole for the rest of his miserable life, he was no longer my problem. He had ceased to exist in my world. I turned back to the house. It was silent now. The police had cleared the rooms. The movers were waiting for my instructions. I walked into my father's study. It was a room I had been forbidden to enter as a child. It smelled of cigars and leather and arrogance. I walked behind the massive oak desk. The chair was high-backed, like a throne. I sat down. The leather creaked. It was comfortable. I looked out the window. From this vantage point, I could see the city of Boston spread out below. I could see the skyscrapers, the river, the winding roads. I could see the empire my father claimed he built, but which I knew he had stolen. And now, it was mine. I picked up a crystal paperweight from the desk. I turned it over in my hand. It was heavy. I felt empty. The rage that had fueled me for days had burned itself out, leaving behind a landscape of ash. I had no parents. I had no brother. I had no home. Really, just a hotel room and a house full of ghosts. But under the emptiness, there was something else. A small, quiet vibration. It was peace. I checked my watch. It was noon. The deadline I had set for myself was over. The Redmond family was dismantled. The assets were secured. The threat was neutralized. I picked up the desk phone. It was the only line that hadn't been cut. "David," I said when he answered. "Charlotte?" David's voice was breathless. "I just saw the news. Evelyn arrested. Richard in the hospital. The company raided. My God, you really did it. You scorched the earth." "I missed a spot," I said, looking at the portrait of my father hanging on the opposite wall. "What do you mean, the foundation?" I said. "The Redmond Family Charity Fund. Liquidate it." "Charlotte, that fund has millions in it. It is for tax breaks. But liquidate it," I repeated. "Take every penny and transfer it to a new entity." "What entity?" David asked. "The Sarah Project," I said. "A legal defense fund for women who have been institutionalized against their will. And a scholarship fund for the children of single mothers." There was a pause on the line. Done, David said softly. I will draw up the papers. I hung up the phone. I swiveled the chair around to face the window again. The sun was high now, reflecting off the snow, blindingly bright. The wolf had eaten. The hunt was over. Now, I just had to figure out how to live as a human being again. But as I watched a hawk circle the currents of air above the estate, I realized I didn't want to be a sheep ever again. I was the matriarch now, and this time, the empire would be built on truth. I thought the silence in my father's office was the end. I thought the war was over because the enemy had been stripped of their armor, their castles, and their weapons. But I had forgotten the most dangerous rule of engagement. A wounded animal, cornered and bleeding, does not surrender. It lashes out at the thing you love most. The phone on the mahogany desk rang at midnight. It was not the office line. It was my personal cell phone, the number known only to a handful of people. The caller ID was blocked. I picked it up, my hand hovering over the recording button. "Hello?" I said into the darkness. "I have him." The voice was unrecognizable at first. It was high, strained, and wet, as if the speaker was talking through a mouthful of gravel. But the cadence was familiar. It was the rhythm of entitlement. "Caleb," I said, "the police are looking for you. Vinny is looking for you. You should be running." "I am done running," Caleb rasped. "I am at the terminal, the Black Falcon cruise terminal. You know the one, where my ship is waiting." "The ship isn't going anywhere, Caleb," I said, "and neither are you." "Shut up," he screamed, the sound distorting over the line. "Listen to me, I have Barnaby." My blood froze. Barnaby was my golden retriever mix, a rescue I had adopted 3 years ago. He was the only living creature who had ever looked at me with adoration instead of utility. When I moved to the hotel, I had placed him in a luxury kennel in Brookline for safety. "That is a lie," I said, though my heart began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. "He is at the kennel. The kennel girl knows me," Caleb laughed. A jagged sound. "She knows I am the loving uncle. I picked him up an hour ago. He is right here. He is shivering. Charlotte, it is very cold out here by the water." A high-pitched yelp echoed through the phone. It was Barnaby. I would know that sound anywhere. "If you touch him," I whispered, my grip on the phone tightening until the plastic creaked, "I will peel the skin from your bones." "Bring me $10 million, Caleb demanded. "Cash, in a duffel bag. Come alone. No cops, no stone. If I see a single flashing light, I throw the dog into the harbor. The tide is going out. He won't last 2 minutes in this freezing water." "Caleb, listen to me." "1 hour," he shrieked. "Pier 4, come alone, or the dog dies." The line went dead. I sat there for 5 seconds, paralyzed by a terror I had not felt when facing Vinny or my parents. Money was just paper, reputation was just smoke, but Barnaby was life. I stood up and sprinted to the door. Stone was waiting in the hallway. "We have a situation," I said, my voice trembling. "He has my dog. He is at the cruise terminal." "We call the police," Stone said, reaching for his radio. "No," I grabbed his wrist. "He said no police. He will kill him." "Stone, he is insane. He has nothing left to lose." "You cannot go alone," Stone argued. "It is a trap. He will kill you the moment he gets the money, or the moment he realizes you don't have it." "I have the money," I said. "I keep a contingency fund in the hotel safe, but I'm not giving it to him. I need a tracker, a microtransmitter. Put it in the lining of the bag." "I am sending a tactical team," Stone insisted. "We will set up a perimeter. We will take him out." "He is on the pier," I said, my mind racing through the logistics. "It is open ground. If he sees movement, he drops the dog. I have to walk in there. I have to be the distraction." I looked at Stone, pleading with the man who had become my shadow. "He is all I have. Stone, please." Stone looked at me, seeing not the client, but the desperate woman beneath the suit. He nodded once. I will have a sniper team on the cranes, Stone said. But the visibility is zero. It is snowing and raining. You have to get him away from the water. You have to get him to the containers. 30 minutes later, I was driving a nondescript sedan toward the waterfront. On the passenger seat sat a black duffel bag. Inside was $1 million in real currency, all I could gather on short notice, and $9 million in cut newspaper. Hidden in the handle was a GPS beacon broadcasting to Stone's team. The Black Falcon terminal was a desolate wasteland of concrete and steel at this hour. The winter storm had turned the world into a blur of gray slush and driving sleet. The wind howled off the Atlantic, cutting through the seals of the car. I parked at the gate. I grabbed the heavy bag and stepped out. The cold hit me like a physical blow, instantly soaking my clothes. I walked past the security booth, which was empty. Caleb must have broken in or bypassed it. Far ahead, looming like a floating city, was the cruise ship. It was the SS Aurora, the vessel my parents had booked for Caleb's getaway. It sat dark and silent against the pier, its lights extinguished. "Caleb!" I shouted, my voice snatched away by the wind. "I am here. I have the money." There was no answer, only the sound of waves slapping against the pylons and the creak of rusting metal. I walked further down the pier, my heels slipping on the icy concrete. I felt exposed. I was a target walking into a kill box. "Over here, little sister." I spun around. Caleb stepped out from behind a stack of shipping pallets. He looked like a corpse that had been dug up and reanimated. His suit was torn and filthy. His broken hand was wrapped in a dirty bandage that was soaked in blood. In his good hand, he held a silver revolver. And tied to his belt by a short length of rope was Barnaby. The dog was shivering violently, his fur matted with ice. When he saw me, he let out a whine and tried to run toward me, but Caleb yanked the rope back, choking him. "Stay!" Caleb screamed, kicking the dog in the ribs. "Don't!" I yelled, dropping the bag. "Don't hurt him. The money is right here. $10 million. Just let him go." Caleb looked at the bag, then at me. His eyes were wild, the pupils blown wide. He was vibrating with adrenaline and whatever drugs were left in his system. "You think you won," Caleb sneered, stepping closer. The gun trained on my chest. "You think because you bought the company, because you humiliated Mom and Dad, that you won, but you didn't win. Charlotte, you just cheated." "I cheated?" I asked, keeping my hands visible. "I wasn't the one who embezzled funds. I wasn't the one who locked a woman in an asylum." "You were born!" Caleb shouted, the sound tearing at his throat. "That was your cheat. You were supposed to be the mistake. You were supposed to be the shame, but you—" He gestured at me with the gun, the barrel waving erratically. "You were always smarter. You were always better with numbers, even when we were kids. I saw it. I saw Dad looking at your report cards. I saw him wishing I was you." "Caleb, that is not true," I said, trying to keep him talking, trying to inch closer to Barnaby. "It is true," he cried. "I hated you for it. I hated that I had to be the heir, and I was too stupid to do it. I had to pretend, I had to fake it every single day. And you just sat there, in the corner, doing the math in your head, mocking me with your silence." He yanked the rope again. Barnaby yelped. "Give me the bag," Caleb commanded. "Kick it over. Let the dog go first," I said. "That is the deal." "I make the deals now," Caleb screamed. He pointed the gun at Barnaby's head. "Kick it over, or I paint the pavement with his brains." I kicked the bag. It slid across the ice and stopped at his feet. Caleb knelt down, keeping the gun trained on me, and unzipped the bag. He saw the stacks of cash on top. He didn't check the bottom layers. He let out a sob of relief. $10 million, he whispered. "I can fix it. I can go away." "The ship won't take you." "Caleb," I said softly, "you have nowhere to go." "Watch me," he spat. He grabbed the bag with his broken hand, wincing, and stood up. Suddenly, a spotlight blinded us from the left. It wasn't the police. It wasn't Stone. A black van tore around the corner of the warehouse, tires screaming on the wet pavement. It skidded to a halt 30 yards away. The side door slid open. Vinny stepped out. He was wearing a long wool coat and holding a shotgun. 2 of his men flanked him, armed with automatic pistols. "Leaving so soon?" "Caleb," Vinny boomed, his voice carrying over the wind. "We had a deal. 7 million by midnight. It is 1 a.m. You are late." Caleb spun around, swinging the gun between me and Vinny. "Stay back. I have the money. I have it right here." "That is my money," Vinny said, walking forward calmly. "And since you made me chase you in this weather, the price has gone up. I want the money, and I want the other hand." "No!" Caleb shrieked. He fired a shot. The bullet sparked off the pavement near Vinny's feet. Chaos erupted. Vinny didn't flinch. He raised the shotgun and fired. The blast was deafening. It wasn't aimed at Caleb. It was a warning shot into the air. But the noise caused Barnaby to panic. The dog lunged, snapping the rope that Caleb had loosely tied to his belt. "Barnaby!" I screamed. At the same moment, the darkness above us exploded with light. Stone's team on the cranes opened fire with suppression rounds, aiming at the ground between the 3 groups to force a standoff. Pop, 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 pop. "Get down!" Stone's voice roared over a loudspeaker. Caleb, terrified by the crossfire, dropped the bag and ran. He didn't run toward me. He ran toward the gangplank of the SS Aurora. Vinny and his men took cover behind their van, exchanging fire with Stone's team who were advancing from the gate. I didn't care about the bullets. I saw a ball of wet fur scrambling on the ice. Confused and terrified, I dove forward, sliding on my knees across the rough concrete. "Barnaby, come here." The dog saw me. He sprinted into my arms. I grabbed him, burying his face in my coat, and rolled us both behind a large metal shipping container just as a bullet ricocheted off the side. I held him tight, checking him for injuries. He was shaking, licking my face frantically. He was alive. "I got you," I whispered, tears freezing on my cheeks. "I got you." I peeked around the edge of the container. Caleb had reached the gangplank. He was scrambling up the metal ramp, clutching his bleeding hand, the bag of money abandoned on the pier. "Let me in," he screamed, banging on the ship's closed hatch. "Open the door. I have a reservation. I am Caleb Redmond." The ship remained silent, a dark monolith. "It won't open. Caleb," I shouted from my hiding spot. He turned, looking down at me from the height of the ramp. He looked like a madman, illuminated by the flashing strobe lights of the arriving police cruisers. "Why?" he screamed. "Why won't it move?" "Because I bought the travel agency yesterday," I yelled back. "I own the charter. Caleb, I ordered the captain to shut down the engines and lock the doors. You are standing on a dead ship." The realization hit him. He was trapped. Below him, Vinny and his men had thrown down their weapons as the SWAT team surrounded them. The police were swarming the pier, rifles raised, shouting commands. "Caleb Redmond, drop the weapon, hands in the air." Caleb looked at the police. He looked at Vinny, who was being cuffed on the ground. He looked at the ship that refused to save him. Then he looked at me. The hate in his eyes was absolute. It was the only thing he had left. If he couldn't have the money, and he couldn't have the freedom, he would take the one thing I had fought to keep. He raised the silver revolver. He wasn't aiming at the police. He was aiming at me, sheltered behind the container. "If I go to hell," Caleb screamed. "You are coming with me." I ducked back, pulling Barnaby with me. A shot rang out. Metal clanged above my head. He had missed, but he was adjusting his aim. He had the high ground. I pressed my back against the cold steel of the container. I had no weapon. Stone was too far away. The police were hesitant to fire because of his position on the ramp. If they shot him, he might fall into the water and be lost, or the bullet might ricochet into the ship's fuel tanks. I heard his footsteps on the metal grate. He was coming down. He was coming to finish it. "Come out, Charlotte," he taunted, his voice drawing closer. "Let's finish the family feud, just you and me." I looked at Barnaby. I unclipped his leash. "Run," I whispered to the dog, pushing him toward the back of the container row. Go. Barnaby hesitated, then bolted into the shadows. I stood up. If he was going to kill me, he wasn't going to shoot me in the back while I was cowering. I was a Redmond, no. I was the daughter of Sarah, and I would face him. I stepped out from behind the container. Caleb was 10 feet away. He stopped. He leveled the gun at my forehead. His hand was shaking, but at this range, he couldn't miss. Any last words? Sis? He sneered, blood dripping from his nose. I looked him in the eye. I didn't see a monster anymore. I saw a pathetic, broken boy who had been destroyed by the very privilege he tried to protect. You are empty, Caleb, I said softly. What? The gun. I lied. You fired 6 shots, 1 at the warehouse, 1 at Vinny, 3 at the police, and 1 at me just now. It is a 6-shooter. Isn't it? Caleb blinked. Doubt flickered in his eyes. He looked down at the cylinder of the revolver for a fraction of a second. That was all the time Stone needed. A single shot cracked through the night air. It didn't come from the police line. It came from the crane tower. 300 yards away. The sniper round struck the revolver in Caleb's hand. The gun exploded into shrapnel. Caleb screamed as the impact threw him backward. He spun around, losing his balance on the icy ramp. He flailed for a rail that wasn't there. Charlotte, he screamed my name one last time, and then he fell. He plummeted 20 feet down into the gap between the ship and the concrete pier. There was a splash, dark and heavy, and then silence. Man down, a police officer shouted. Suspect in the water. 2 officers ran to the edge, shining flashlights into the black. Churning gap. I didn't run to look. I slumped against the container, my legs giving out. I slid down until I hit the cold pavement. Barnaby came trotting back from the shadows. He licked the tears from my face, whining softly. I buried my hands in his fur, feeling the warmth of his life against the freezing night. Stone appeared in front of me. He was breathless, his gun drawn but lowered. Are you hit? He demanded, checking me over. No, I whispered. I am fine. The divers are going in, Stone said, looking toward the water. But the current under these piers is strong. I looked toward the dark water. The black ocean that had promised him an escape had instead become his cell. He is gone. Stone, I said, closing my eyes. He was gone a long time ago. The sirens wailed, a requiem for the Redmond dynasty. I sat on the frozen ground, holding my dog, and listened to the sound of an empire washing away with the tide. The sniper's bullet had shattered the revolver in Caleb's hand, but it had not shattered his delusion. The impact threw him back against the railing of the gangplank, but he did not fall, not yet. He clung to the frozen metal stanchion, his hand bleeding, his breath coming in ragged, white puffs against the winter night. The police had advanced, their laser sights painting his chest with a dozen red dots. Vinny and his crew were already face down on the pavement, cuffed and neutralized. But Caleb stood on the precipice, a broken king on a sinking throne, looking down at me with eyes that still held a spark of madness. It is not over, he screamed, his voice cracking. I am still a Redmond. I still have the name. I will fight you. I will sue you. I will get it all back. He looked ready to charge the police line, to die in a blaze of misguided glory. Stand down, Stone shouted, his weapon trained on Caleb's center mass. Don't do it, kid. I walked forward. I signaled Stone to hold his fire. I walked until I was standing at the bottom of the ramp, looking up at the brother who had tormented me for a lifetime. The wind whipped my hair across my face, but I did not feel the cold. I felt a strange, crystalline clarity. There is nothing to get back. Caleb, I said, my voice calm, cutting through the wind. I am the heir, he spat, blood dripping from his chin. Dad left me the company. He left me the empire. The empire is a ghost, I said. And so is the inheritance. I took a step closer. I needed him to hear this. I needed the truth to hit him harder than the bullet. You think you are the golden boy? I asked. You think you were being groomed for success, Caleb. You were being groomed for slaughter. Dad has been bankrupt for 5 years. Caleb froze. The wind howled around us, but he went perfectly still. Liar. Check the books, I said. Or ask the forensic team tearing apart the office right now. The company has been insolvent since the housing crash. Dad lost everything. The mansion, the cars, the lifestyle. It was all run on credit. But not his credit. He couldn't get loans anymore. I saw the confusion ripple across his face. Then how? You? I said. He used you. Why do you think he made you CEO in name only? Why do you think he put your name on every document? Every loan application, every risky investment? He was using your clean credit score to prop up his failures. Every dollar you spent, every trip you took, every car you drove, it was borrowed in your name. You didn't inherit a fortune, Caleb. You inherited a crater. You are $50 million in debt, and you haven't even gone to trial for the drugs yet. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees buckled. He looked at the ship behind him, the ship I owned. He looked at the police. He looked at me. He wasn't a prince. He was a patsy. His parents hadn't favored him. They had sacrificed him. They had fattened him up like a calf for the slaughter, using his identity to shield themselves from their own incompetence. They knew, Caleb whispered. They designed it, I confirmed. A wail tore from his throat, a sound of pure, animal despair. The delusion that had sustained him for 38 years shattered. He looked at his broken hand, then at the freezing black water swirling below the pier. I am nothing, he sobbed. He let go of the railing. He didn't try to run. He didn't try to attack. He turned toward the dark water, his body leaning forward, seeking the only escape left to him. He was going to jump. Subject is jumping, Stone yelled. Crack! A single shot rang out from a police marksman. It wasn't a kill shot. It was a stopper. The bullet struck Caleb in the right shoulder, spinning him away from the edge. He collapsed onto the metal grating of the gangplank, screaming in pain, unable to crawl to the water. The SWAT team swarmed up the ramp. They pinned him down. They dragged him, kicking and sobbing, back to the solid ground of the pier. I watched them cuff him. He looked at me one last time as they shoved him into the back of a cruiser. There was no hate left in his eyes, only emptiness. Take him away, I said to Stone. I have a meeting to finish. The interrogation room at the District 4 police station was stark. Lit by fluorescent lights that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, it was 3 a.m. They were all there. The family reunion I had orchestrated. My father, Richard, had been discharged from the hospital and brought straight into custody. Looking frail in a hospital gown and a pair of oversized handcuffs, my mother, Evelyn, sat next to him, her expensive hair matted, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed violently with her pale skin. And Caleb, his arm in a sling, his hand casted, sat slumped at the end of the table, staring at the wall. They looked small, without their mansion, without their clothes, without their lies. They were just 3 criminals in a concrete box. I stood on the other side of the one-way glass, watching them. Beside me stood David, my lawyer, and Detective Miller, the lead investigator on the case. Are you ready, Ms. Redmond? Detective Miller asked. Yes, I said. I opened the door and walked in. The room went silent. My mother looked up, her eyes narrowing. My father couldn't meet my gaze. Caleb didn't move. I sat down in the single metal chair opposite them. I placed a file folder on the table. Charlotte, my father croaked, please, you have made your point. Help us. We can still fix this. We can make a deal. There are no more deals. Richard, I said, we are here for the epilogue. We are your family, Evelyn snapped, though her voice lacked its usual fire. You cannot let us rot in here. Think of the scandal. The scandal is already out, Evelyn, I said. But we missed one detail, one loose end. I opened the file. Inside was an old yellowing medical chart. It was stamped with the logo of the Greystone Psychiatric Institute. "We know about the fraud," I said. "We know you gaslighted my biological mother. Sarah, we know you paid Dr. Arrington to falsify her records and have her committed so you could steal me." "We admitted that," Caleb shouted, finally looking up. "I told the cops. That is why we are here." "What more do you want?" "That is kidnapping and fraud," I said calmly. "Those carry a sentence of 10 to 20 years. You might get out on parole. You might survive that." I slid a second document across the table. It was a copy of a "Do Not Resuscitate" order, dated 32 years ago. "But this," I tapped the paper, "this is a life sentence. This is the death penalty." My father stopped breathing. He stared at the signature on the document. "We dug up the archives," I said, my voice turning to ice. "Sarah didn't die of pneumonia. She had a treatable infection. She was on a ventilator. She was recovering, but then a DNR order appeared in her file, an order signed by her legal guardian." I looked at my father. "You were her guardian. Richard, you had the power of attorney because she was declared incompetent." I, Richard stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "You ordered the doctors to pull the plug," I said. "You didn't just let her die, you executed her. You realized that as long as she was alive, she was a threat. She could get better. She could get a lawyer. So you killed her." The word hung in the air like smoke. Murder. Evelyn let out a sharp gasp. She turned on her husband, her eyes wide with panic. "You told me she died," Evelyn screamed at him. "You told me it was natural. You told me the infection took her. I didn't know. I didn't know you killed her." "You knew," Richard shouted back, his cowardice turning into viciousness. "You told me to handle it. You said, 'Make the problem go away, Richard.' You said you didn't want that woman breathing the same air as us. You pushed me to do it." "I never told you to kill her," Evelyn shrieked, clawing at his hospital gown. "I meant pay her off. I meant send her away, you murderer. You aren't dragging me down for this." "She is lying," Caleb yelled, trying to distance himself from the carnage. "I was a kid. I didn't know anything Mom and Dad did. I am a victim here. Look at what they did to me. They made me a drug mule. They stole my credit. I will testify. I will tell you everything if you cut me a deal." "You traitor," Evelyn spat at her son. "After everything I gave you, after the cruise, after the cars." "You gave me debt," Caleb screamed, tears running down his face. "You gave me nothing but a fake life." They were on their feet now, screaming, pointing fingers, tearing at each other like starving dogs in a pit. The facade of the perfect family was gone, replaced by the ugly, raw truth of their selfishness. They didn't love each other. They were just accomplices who had turned on one another the moment the heat got too high. I watched them for a moment longer. I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of closure. I stood up. They didn't notice. They were too busy shouting. I walked to the door. Detective Miller was waiting. "They are confessing to everything," Miller said, looking at the chaotic scene inside. "We have it all on tape. Conspiracy to commit murder, manslaughter, fraud. They are never getting out." "Good," I said. I walked out to the front desk. David was there with a stack of papers. "The auction documents," David said quietly. "Are you sure about this? Charlotte? The estate? The jewelry? The remaining assets you could keep the house?" "I don't want the house," I said, taking the pen. "I don't want the blood money." I signed the papers with a flourish. Authorization to liquidate assets, beneficiary, the Sarah Project, Foundation for Orphaned Children. "Sell it all," I said, handing the clipboard back. "Burn the furniture if you have to. Just make sure the money goes to the kids who didn't have a voice." I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the police station and stepped out. The storm had passed. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue, the morning sun reflecting off the fresh snow that blanketed the city. The air was crisp and clean. A black Land Rover Defender, brand new and rugged, was idling at the curb, Stone was in the driver's seat. He rolled down the window. "Ready to go, boss?" he asked. I looked into the back seat. Barnaby was there, curled up on a heated blanket, safe and warm. He lifted his head and wagged his tail when he saw me. I climbed into the passenger seat. The leather smelled new. It smelled like a beginning. I pulled out my phone one last time. I had one message to send. To David. "It is done. Start the park construction immediately. I want Sarah's name on the gate by spring." I threw the phone into the center console. I didn't look back at the police station. I didn't look back at the cell where the Redmonds were currently destroying each other. "Where to?" Stone asked. "North," I said, watching the city skyline fade in the rearview mirror. "Somewhere quiet." The Land Rover pulled away, tires crunching on the snow, carrying me away from the wreckage of a dynasty and into a future that was finally, truly mine. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed witnessing justice being served, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Charlotte's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe to the Blue Payback channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a little victory in their lives. See you in the next story.